Title: A night maintenance worker's final recording. The view is from a shaky body cam, the audio muffled by the rustle of clothing against the mic. The ambient hum of fluorescent lights is a constant presence. A man's face, round and etched with laugh lines, leans into the frame as he fiddles with the camera on his chest. "All right, Martha, here we go. It's..." He glances at his watch. 10:03. Officially on the clock for the last time. 30 years I've been walking these halls, and I swear they added a new one last week just to spite me. You said I should mark the occasion, so here I am, wearing a body cam. Like on one of those cop shows you love. Except my biggest bust is usually a leaky urinal in the faculty lounge. He lets out a warm, breathy chuckle. The camera view steadies, revealing a long linoleum hallway in what looks like a university building. A large janitorial cart sits nearby. He grabs its handle, and it rattles as he begins to push it along. So this is it, the grand tour. 30 years of my life, all packed into this north tower. They say if you stand in the main atrium at midnight, you can still hear the ghost of Professor Albright going on about quantum physics. Well, I've been here at midnight for 30 years. The only thing I've ever heard is the ice machine down in the cafeteria having some kind of breakdown. Still, you never know. Maybe tonight's the night. Maybe he'll pop up to wish me a happy retirement. First stop, same as always. Quick sweep of the ground floor lobby. You know, for all the ghosts in their muddy boots. They built this place in the 60s. Solid. But all these old buildings, they breathe. They make noises. After a few years, you learn the difference between the pipes settling and, well, other things. The new guys never last. They hear a little creak in the library stacks, and they're halfway home before their supervisor can even answer the radio. Not me. Me and this building, we've got an understanding. It groans, I sweep, and we both pretend the other isn't slowly falling apart. He starts sweeping, the rhythmic scrape-scrape of the push broom the only sound. His movements are practiced, efficient, lost in the routine. I remember when our Jimmy was just a kid. Brought him here one Saturday, and he thought the place was a castle. He ran up and down this very hallway, his little sneakers squeaking on the fresh wax. Now his own kids getting ready for college. Time, Martha? Just slips right through your fingers like dust. 30 years. Tomorrow, I'm not setting an alarm. I'm going to sleep until the sun is so high, it's banging on the window, demanding I get up. Then you and me, we're getting in the car, and we're just gonna drive. No map, no destination, just drive. Section 1, the first anomaly. He finishes sweeping and pushes the cart toward the university library. He shoves the heavy, dark wood doors open, revealing a vast, cavernous space. Desks and chairs sit in perfect silent rows, stretching into the gloom beyond the weak overhead lights. All right, library time, the cathedral of silence. I've always hated mopping this floor. It's original marble. Shows every single scuff mark, every single drop of water. You mop a section, turn around, and it looks like a whole army's marched through. He fills a bucket from his cart and starts mopping near the entrance, working his way backward, leaving a glistening, dark trail on the white marble. He hums softly to himself. After a few minutes, he finishes a large patch. There, now for the sign. Can't have Professor Albright's ghost slipping and breaking a spectral hip. Imagine the paperwork. He turns and walks the 20 feet back to his cart, rummaging around for a yellow, wet floor sign. Got it, see? Safety first. Even on the last day. He turns back around. The camera pans up. There, in the dead center of the perfectly clean, still damp floor he just mopped, is a single muddy boot print. It's large and edged with bits of dirt and dead leaves. What the... He stops cold. His humming cuts off. He takes a slow step forward, the camera zooming slightly on the print. It's starkly out of place. The quiet of the library suddenly feels heavy. Okay, real funny. You can come out. Class clown, I get it. Spook the old janitor on his last night. Haha, I'm not laughing. Look, I just want to finish my shift. I don't have time for games. He waits, absolute silence. He scans the darkened rows of bookshelves, the empty desks, the shadowed balconies overhead. Nothing. Must be my mind playing tricks on me. Old man's eyes. Yeah, that's it. Just a smudge. A smudge that just happens to look exactly like a boot print. From a boot that's been tromping through the woods. Inside a locked building, right. His voice has lost its earlier warmth. He sounds like he's trying to convince himself. He lets out a long, tired sigh, walks over, and scrubs the print away with a few angry strokes of the mop. He works in silence now, his movements quicker, jerkier. He keeps glancing over his shoulder into the darkness. Section 2. Escalating sounds and paranoia. He finishes the library floor, but his mood is soured. He pushes the cart faster, its rattling wheels echoing loudly in the empty halls as he heads toward the science wing. Science wing, always the creepiest part of campus. Something about all these labs, all the things they used to do in here. Animal testing, back in the day. Martha, you remember that story about old Dr. Elias? The one who, well, never mind. Just stories. He enters a long corridor lined with labs, each door marked by a small, wired glass window. He's supposed to check that each one is locked. As he passes a door, he hears a faint tink, like a glass beaker being nudged. He freezes, his hand on the doorknob. He leans in, pressing his face to the small window. The lab inside is dark, filled with the hulking shapes of equipment. Hello? Anybody in there? The building's closed. Silence. He waits a full minute, his breath fogging the glass. He pulls a long ring of keys from his belt, the jangling loud and sharp in the quiet hall. Probably just the air conditioning, making the glass rattle. That's all. It's an old building. It breathes. He continues, but his pace is slower now. He's trying the door to a large lecture hall when another sound comes from the floor directly above him. A distinct, heavy scrape. The sound of a desk chair being dragged across a concrete floor. He flinches, looking up at the ceiling. His breathing is audible now. No way. The whole B wing is locked for the summer. Floor 2 is empty. I checked the schedule. I'm the only one in this whole damn place tonight. I am the only one here. He's muttering to himself, his voice a low, nervous tremor. He abandons the doors and shoves his cart toward the main stairwell. Okay, Artie, get a grip. It's your last night. You're tired. 30 years of nights has to catch up with you, eventually. You're hearing things. That's all it is. Just need some coffee. Just gotta get to the staff room. Section 3. The locked door, he bypasses the staff room, instead heading down a set of concrete stairs into the basement. The air grows cool and damp. Bare bulbs in wire cages cast a weak yellow glow. Boiler check. Gotta check the boiler. Always hated this part. It's a maze down here, so easy to get turned around. He navigates a labyrinth of humming pipes and massive silent machinery, shining his light on a row of identical, heavy metal doors. B11, B12, B13. He stops. The body cam's light settles on the door for storage room B13. It's slightly ajar. On the floor in front of it lie a heavy industrial padlock and hasp. The lock isn't broken. It's just open. No, this door is never open. It is always locked. Facilities manager's orders. They keep old university records in there, stuff from before computers. I haven't seen this door open in 20 years. He inches forward. The darkness inside the doorway is absolute, a solid block of black. Hello? Is someone in there? This is a restricted area. His own voice echoes back at him. Nothing else. He stands there for a long time, his breathing ragged. I should call this in. Call security right now. He reaches for the radio on his shoulder, then stops, his hand trembling. You know what? It's my last night. I'm not getting tangled in some report. They'll keep me here till dawn. Some dumb kid probably broke in. They're long gone. I'm gonna lock it. And I'll leave a note in the morning log. That's it. His hands shake as he picks up the padlock. It takes him 2 tries to fit the hasp back on the door. He shoves the lock closed. It snaps shut with a loud, final-sounding thud. He tugs on it hard. Secure? There, locked. Now let's get the hell out of this basement. Section 4. The confrontation, he practically runs from the basement, leaving his cart behind. He takes the stairs 2 at a time, his breath coming in heavy, panicked bursts. He emerges in the main administration wing, a long carpeted hallway lined with offices. Okay. Just the offices to check. Then the final walkthrough, and I'm out. Out for good. 45 more minutes, Artie. You can do this. You're fine. It is just kids. Pranksters. He starts emptying a small office trash can into a bag. As he ties the knot, the entire hallway plunges into total darkness. The emergency lights don't kick in. The only thing piercing the black is the small, weak beam from his body cam. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. A power failure? Tonight? He fumbles for his radio. This is Arthur Coleman to base. Copy? I've got a power outage in the admin wing. Hello? Base, come in. Only harsh static crackles back. And then from the far end of the pitch-black hallway, a new sound. A soft, rhythmic, wet shuffling. Asterisk sheath thump. S-H thump. Artie freezes, holding his breath. The sound is slowly getting closer. Who's there? I'm warning you. I've called the police. The shuffling stops. He sweeps the body cam light down the long corridor. The beam cuts through the darkness, hitting nothing but an empty hall. Suddenly, with a loud hum and a blinding flicker, the main lights flash back on. The hallway is empty. Except, at the far end of the corridor, the door to the basement stairwell, the one he'd just come through, is standing wide open. Section 5. The climax? No. No. Artie's voice is a choked whisper. Pure terror takes over. He turns and runs, abandoning everything. His only thought is escape. The camera shakes wildly, his gasping breaths loud and painful. The sounds follow him. The wet shuffling seems to be right at his heels. A classroom door he runs past slams shut with a deafening bang just after he clears it. A shrill alarm begins to blare from a distant wing. He bursts into the main atrium, the massive 2-story space from the start of the night. He barrels toward the huge glass entrance doors, toward salvation. He slams into them. They don't budge. He pushes again, his palms slapping against the unmoving glass. A thick, rusty chain is wrapped around the handles from the inside, secured with another heavy padlock. Impossible. That chain is kept in a maintenance closet. He knows. He turns around slowly, his back pressed against the cold glass, his chest heaving. The camera pans across the empty atrium. For a second, there is nothing. Then, in the center of the marble floor, a figure stands where there was nothing before. It's impossibly tall and thin, its limbs too long. It's a human-shaped void, a distortion of shadow that seems to swallow the light around it. Artie lets out a raw, terrified scream. He fumbles at his chest, at the body cam. Turn off. How do you, Martha? He gives up and runs blindly back into the maze of the university. There is no exit. There is only running. Conclusion. The footage becomes a chaotic blur. Artie's frantic, weeping breaths fill the audio. He sprints down a corridor and throws his shoulder into a door, stumbling into a small office. He tries to slam the heavy wooden door shut. Something pushes back from the other side. The door won't close. Artie grunts, his feet slipping on the tile floor as the wood groans under the strain. A new sound overpowers his panicked breathing. A high-pitched, electronic screeching, like an old modem dialing up, but organic and full of pain. Underneath it, a low, guttural whisper is audible, distorted and incomprehensible. The door is suddenly thrown open with terrifying force, knocking Artie backward. He screams a final choked-off sound. The camera falls from his chest, clattering to the floor. It points up at the acoustic tile ceiling. The shuffling sound is loud, right next to the microphone, followed by a wet, tearing noise that lasts for several seconds. Then, abrupt, total silence. The camera continues to record the dusty ceiling tiles for a full 30 seconds before the footage cuts to a loud burst of static, and the recording ends. Title: 3 disturbing real-life horror accounts. There are skins to reality. Thin membranes that separate the world we think we know from the one that seethes just beneath it. Most of the time, we live our lives without ever touching that veil. But sometimes it tears. Sometimes the monster isn't under the bed. It's wearing a familiar face. Sometimes the horror bleeds into our world from a place with no name. And sometimes the two are so hideously intertwined, you can no longer tell the flesh from the phantom. Today, we peel back the skin on 3 true stories, each one disturbing in its own right. We'll witness a family's love curdle into a fatal act of exorcism. We'll uncover the human parasite who lived like a spider in an attic, a ghost made of flesh and blood before committing a brutal murder. And finally, we will confront the story of a man whose inner demons seem to physically erupt into the world around him, leaving hardened police officers and prison guards to question their own sanity. These are not campfire tales. They are documented collapses of the ordinary. Our first story begins in a quiet London home, where faith and madness would give birth to an unimaginable horror. Section 1. The Deadly Exorcism of Kennedy Ife. In August 2016, a darkness fell over the Ife family of Enfield, London. Their son, 26-year-old Kennedy Ife, was coming undone. His behavior grew violent, unpredictable. He spoke of a serpent coiled inside his own flesh, a venomous thing he had to be rid of. In his mania, he made threats of grotesque self-harm, including a terrifying desire to sever his own penis. To his family, devout charismatic Christians, this wasn't sickness. This wasn't a mind in collapse. This was a demonic infestation. They believed Kennedy was possessed, and they chose faith over medicine. They wouldn't call a doctor. They would wage a holy war in their own living room. For 3 days, they conducted a desperate, homemade exorcism. They bound Kennedy with whatever they could find: rope, handcuffs, cable ties, trying to chain the demon they were so sure was thrashing inside their son's body. Their home became a battleground. As Kennedy fought against his bonds, his family prayed, their voices rising in a desperate chorus for his soul's deliverance. But as hours bled into agonizing days, Kennedy's body began to fail. Starved of adequate food and water, with the restraints constricting his breath, the life was being crushed out of him. On August 22nd, a call was finally made to 999. His brother reported that Kennedy was dehydrated and struggling to breathe. By the time paramedics forced their way in, it was too late. They found Kennedy lifeless. His body was a testament to the struggle, scarred with over 60 injuries, including what appeared to be a human bite mark. As a final, haunting testament to their unshakable belief, police reportedly found one of Kennedy's brothers still trying to resurrect him with chants and prayers. The trial that followed laid bare the anatomy of a tragedy. The family was charged with manslaughter and false imprisonment, with the prosecution arguing they had allowed misguided religious beliefs to eclipse the screamingly obvious fact that Kennedy needed a doctor, not a demonologist. Yet, in the end, they were cleared of all charges. The law couldn't untangle the knot of sincere, loving intentions from their fatal consequences. The case of Kennedy Ife is a chilling map of that borderland between faith and delusion, a place where the attempt to save a soul can utterly destroy a body. Section 2. The Spider-Man of Denver. In the fall of 1941, in Denver, Colorado, a ghost began to haunt the home of Philip Panover. Only this ghost was alive. Peters, a 73-year-old widower, was living alone while his wife, Helen, was in the hospital recovering from a broken hip. Neighbors kept a watchful eye on the old man, but on October 17th, he failed to show up for a planned dinner. The police were called, and they found a scene of shocking violence. Philip Panover was dead, bludgeoned inside his home. The unsettling part? Every door and window was locked from the inside. There was no sign of a break-in, no weapon, and no suspect. The murder was a perfect sealed room mystery, and a phantom killer seemed to be walking the streets of Denver. When Helen Panover returned home after her husband's funeral, the house felt wrong. She and her new housekeeper heard phantom footsteps and smelled strange odors. The housekeeper, convinced Philip's spirit was restless, fled in terror. Helen soon followed, abandoning the house on Moncrief Place to its ghosts and its secrets. The house sat empty for nearly a year, a monument to an unsolved killing. Police checks turned up nothing. Then, on July 23, 1942, an officer on a routine check heard something impossible, the distinct click of a lock from the second floor of the vacant home. He raced upstairs just in time to see a pair of filthy legs vanish through a tiny trapdoor in a closet. They had found their ghost. The creature they pulled down was a man named Theodore Cornwall, a 59-year-old drifter. Gaunt and foul, he confessed to a story more bizarre than any haunting. Months earlier, he'd broken into the Peters home and discovered a tiny crawl space in the attic. He decided to stay. For 5 weeks, he had lived there, a human parasite, completely undetected. He was a shadow in their home, stealing food while Philip was out. On the night of the murder, he misjudged. He thought Philip had left, but the old man was only napping. Discovered in the kitchen, Cornwall panicked. He grabbed a heavy iron stove shaker and beat Peters to death, then retreated back into his dark, cramped nest. For 9 more months, he remained hidden in the attic, a secret observer listening to the police and the world puzzle over the murder he committed. An officer who examined the crawlspace said, "A man would have to be a spider to stand it long up there." The name stuck. The press crowned him the Denver Spider-Man. Theodore Cornwall was sentenced to life in prison, dying there in 1967. The haunting on Moncrief Place wasn't supernatural. The truth was infinitely more disturbing. A monster had made a web in another man's home, hiding in plain sight. These stories show just how thin the skin of our world is. Sometimes the horror is all too human, and sometimes its origins are far more mysterious. If you find this exploration of the dark and the strange compelling, hit the like button. It tells me you want more journeys into the places where the map reads, "Here be monsters." Now, for our final story, we go to a place where the walls themselves began to weep, and a man's inner torment became a physical storm. Section 3. The Rain Man of Monroe County. In February 1983, a 21-year-old inmate named Don Denver was given a temporary furlough from the Monroe County Jail in Pennsylvania. He was off to his grandfather's funeral, an event that would uncork a well of trauma and allegedly something far stranger. Don despised his grandfather, the man who had physically abused him for years, and the funeral filled him with a cold rage. Afterward, he went to the home of his friends, the Kiefers. While in their bathroom, a sudden chill seized him. He claimed to see a vision of a crowned man, then collapsed, later finding deep, inexplicable scratches on his arm. Later that evening, as they all sat in the living room, the room grew cold, and water began to bead on the walls and drip from the ceiling. This was no simple leak. The landlord was called and confirmed there were no water pipes in that part of the house. Witnesses, including the landlord, watched as water seemed to defy gravity, moving horizontally across surfaces and even appearing to drip upwards from the floorboards. As this impossible rain intensified, Doan Denver seemed to fall into a trance. The terrified Kiefers called the police. An officer named John Bryan arrived and witnessed the same phenomenon. He later reported feeling a profound chill, stating he'd never seen anything that could explain what was happening. The events followed Doan. When the group went to a pizzeria across the street, the rain started again, inside the restaurant. The owner, convinced Doan was possessed, pressed a crucifix to his skin. According to multiple witnesses, it burned him instantly, leaving a red mark. When Don's furlough ended, the phenomenon followed him back to jail. Water began to pour from the concrete ceiling and walls of his cell. One skeptical guard challenged Doan to make it rain in the warden's office. Minutes later, the warden, sitting alone in his office, found his shirt suddenly and inexplicably soaked. Now convinced, the warden summoned a reverend to perform an exorcism. Witnesses claimed that as the reverend prayed, a foul smell filled the room and the indoor rain fell one last time before finally stopping for good. Skeptics maintain the entire affair was an elaborate hoax, but that would require the collusion of multiple, unrelated witnesses, including police and prison officials. Others suggest the events, while not a hoax, were a form of psychokinetic manifestation, a poltergeist born not from a ghost, but from the storm of trauma in Decker's own mind. The story of Doan Decker remains a deeply unsettling account, not because it's a proven case of the paranormal, but because of the terrifying questions it leaves behind. Was it a haunting? A hoax? Or did one man's inner suffering become so great that it literally began to drown the world around him? Conclusion: a family's love weaponized by faith. A man who became a ghost in his own city. A human storm of grief and rage made manifest. 3 stories that remind us that the boundaries we erect between the real and the unreal are fragile things. They force us to ask where the monster truly lies. Is it in the demon a family sees in their son? Is it in the man hiding in the walls? Or is it in the darkness that can sometimes erupt from the human heart itself? The most terrifying answer is that sometimes there is no line, there is no separation. It's all just a part of the same terrible and wondrous tapestry. Title: Reddit's Creepiest Night Shift Horror Stories. Have you ever worked the graveyard shift? When the silence gets so deep, you can actually hear your own heartbeat. The rest of the world goes to sleep, and you're left alone with just the shadows and the quiet. But for some people, that quiet gets shattered by something terrifying. These stories, pulled straight from Reddit, are from night shifters who thought they were all alone, but they were dead wrong. From phantom figures in empty hospital wings to bone-chilling encounters at 24-hour gas stations, these tales will make you think twice about working the night shift. You're about to hear 3 real stories from people who found out that when the sun goes down, something much, much darker is waiting to come out. The room at the end of the hall. Our first story takes us inside a hospital late at night. If you've ever been in one after hours, you know it has a special kind of quiet. It's not peaceful. It's a heavy, sterile silence, broken only by the faint beep of a machine or the squeak of shoes on linoleum. Our narrator, we'll call him Mark, was a hospital transporter who was used to this world. He spent his nights moving people and equipment through long, dimly lit hallways. One night, a patient passed away in a room at the very end of the 4th floor wing. It's a sad, but normal, part of the job. The room was cleaned, sanitized, and marked as empty. For a few hours, it was just another vacant room. Later that shift, around 2 a.m., Mark was heading down that same hallway. As he passed the room, he glanced inside out of habit, and his heart just about stopped. Sitting in the visitor's chair, hunched over like she was asleep, was a little old lady, Mark frowned. It was strange for a new patient to be put in a room so quickly, especially without any notice in the middle of the night. He figured it had to be a family member who'd fallen asleep and been forgotten by security. He walked up to the nurse's station to check the floor's patient list. The room was still listed as empty. No new patient. Confused, he grabbed a nurse and they walked back to the room together. Mark explained that an old woman was sitting in the chair, but when they both peered inside, the room was completely empty. The chair was vacant, the bed was perfectly made, and the air was still. The woman had vanished. Mark knew there was no way she could have gotten past him in the narrow hall. There was no other exit. A deep chill crawled up his spine. The nurse, looking a little pale herself, asked him what the woman looked like. Mark gave a simple description, small and frail, with her gray hair in a bun, wearing a pale blue hospital gown. The nurse's face went completely white. She told him his description perfectly matched the patient who had died in that exact room just a few hours earlier. Mark says he never volunteered for jobs on the 4th floor again, especially at night. He just couldn't shake the feeling that some patients never really check out. If that story sent a shiver down your spine, you'll want to stick around. We have 2 more stories tonight that prove the most terrifying things happen while the rest of the world is fast asleep. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more tales from the darkest corners of Reddit. Section 2. The Voice on the Line. This next story comes from a former 911 operator. She said her job on the night shift was a bizarre mix of total boredom and heart-stopping terror. Most of the night would be dead quiet, but then a single call would come through that made her blood run cold. This was one of those calls. It started on a Tuesday. A call came in on the 911 line. She answered, but there was no one there. Just a wall of static and white noise. She ran through her script, and after a few seconds, the line disconnected. It was weird, but not unheard of. Pocket dials, faulty lines, it happens. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Every single night, at almost the exact same time, a call would come in from the same number. Each time, it was just a blast of deafening white noise, and sometimes what sounded like horrible screaming mixed in with the static. It was terrifying. Every time it happened, they sent officers to the address connected to the landline, and every time the report came back the same. The house was vacant, locked up tight, no signs of entry, and nobody inside. Her bosses told her it was just a technical glitch, a bad phone line getting wet in the rain, but that never explained the screaming. This went on for weeks. The nightly call became a source of dread in the dispatch center. The operator had the number memorized. One night, the call came in right on schedule. She answered, bracing for the static, but this time was different. Beneath the noise, she could hear something else. A faint, pained whisper, like someone trying to force out words but couldn't. Fed up and genuinely scared, she broke protocol. She leaned into her headset and yelled, "Who is this? What do you want?" For a second, there was total silence on the line. The static, the whispering, everything just stopped. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. And then a voice came through. It wasn't pain or screaming. It was a man's voice, perfectly clear, calm, and chillingly close. It said, "I know you're alone." Then the line went dead. The call stopped after that night. The police searched the house one last time and found nothing. No one ever found out who the caller was, or if there even was one. But the operator never forgot those words. Sometimes, the real horror isn't something you see, but a voice on an empty line, reminding you that someone or something knows exactly where you are. Section 3. The Customer in the Dark. Our final story happens in one of the loneliest places you can be. A remote, 24-hour gas station in the middle of nowhere. The storyteller was a college kid, just trying to make extra cash on the graveyard shift. His job was simple: stay awake and handle the few truckers and late-night drivers that passed through between midnight and 6 a.m. Most nights were just him, the hum of the drink coolers, and the headlights of passing cars. But one night was different. Around 3 m.a., a beat-up sedan pulled into the lot. It didn't pull up to a pump, but instead parked in a dark corner, far from the store's bright lights. The engine cut out. The headlights went off. And then, nothing. The car just sat there. The narrator watched it on the security camera, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach as minutes stretched into what felt like forever. Finally, the driver's side door creaked open, and a man got out. He was tall and thin, and he moved with this strange, slow purpose as he walked towards the store. He came inside, and at first, he seemed normal enough. He grabbed a coffee and came up to the counter. But as our narrator was ringing him up, the man started talking. He talked about how quiet it was, how incredibly dark it gets out there, how you could probably hear a scream from a mile away. His tone was casual, but his eyes were laser-focused. The narrator just gave a nervous laugh, trying to play it cool. Then, the man glanced back at his car. The narrator's eyes followed his, and that's when he saw it for the first time. A figure sitting in the passenger seat. They were sitting perfectly still, their face hidden by shadows, not moving a muscle. The driver leaned in, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "My friend out there," he said, nodding towards the car. "They don't like a lot of noise. They really enjoy the silence." He paused and looked right into the narrator's eyes. "So it's probably for the best if you stay quiet for a little while. We wouldn't want to disturb them." He put the exact change on the counter, gave a tight, thin smile, and walked out. He got back in his car, and for another 10 minutes, it just sat there in the dark. The narrator was frozen, his hand hovering over the panic button, his mind racing with what could be happening. He stared at that unmoving passenger. Finally, the car's headlights flashed on, and it slowly pulled out of the lot and vanished down the empty highway. He said the rest of his shift was the longest night of his life. He locked the doors and hid in the back room, watching the security monitors until the sun came up. He never saw the car or the man again, and he never found out who or what was sitting in that passenger seat. He quit the next day. Some silences aren't peaceful. They're a warning. Conclusion: the night shift is its own world, isn't it? A world where the normal rules of the day don't seem to apply, and the line between what's real and what's a nightmare, it's terrifyingly thin. For the people in these stories, the quiet of their job was shattered by something they'll never be able to explain. So the next time you're working late, or just find yourself alone in the dark, remember these stories and ask yourself, are you really alone? Thanks for watching. If you've got your own creepy night shift story, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life horror stories. Stay safe out there. Title: The Walmart Employee Who Found Something Terrifying in Aisle 13. What you're about to hear is a story born from the legends of the Galveston Walmart, a place haunted by a terrible past. For the overnight employees, the ones who walk the silent aisles when the world is asleep, those legends can feel frighteningly real. This is especially true in the toy aisle, where some workers swear the toys move on their own. Most of us have had a retail job, spending hours under harsh fluorescent lights, stocking shelves and dealing with customers. It's usually boring, sometimes tiring, and occasionally weird. But for many employees at the Walmart on Seawall Boulevard in Galveston, Texas, the job is more than just weird, it's terrifying. Local lore says this store was built near the former grounds of the St. Mary's Orphan Home, the site of one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. This story is a dramatization of their collective experiences, of what happens when you stop believing in coincidence and start believing in ghosts. Let's call our main character Alex. Alex needed a job. College is expensive, and the overnight stalker gig at the local Walmart paid pretty well. The 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift was tough, but it meant he could still make his morning classes. The job was straightforward. Unload pallets, stock the shelves, don't fall asleep. On his first night, his trainer, Maria, showed him the ropes. She pointed down the store's main drag, called Action Alley. "You'll do grocery, paper, seasonal," she said, before her gaze drifted to a far corner of the store. "Just try to avoid aisle 13 if you can. The managers don't like people wasting time over there." Alex didn't think twice about it, but over the next few weeks, he started hearing the stories. Whispers in the break room, hushed conversations by the time clock. They were always about aisle 13, the toy aisle. One coworker swore he'd heard kids laughing when the store was empty. Another talked about a big red ball that would just roll out of its cage like someone had thrown it. There were even tales of a little girl's voice crying for her mother. Alex, who didn't believe in ghost stories, would just laugh. "It's an old building on the coast," he'd say. "Buildings settle. The wind makes weird noises. You're all just tired and seeing things." He had a rational explanation for everything. Running feet? A rat in the ceiling? An item falling off a shelf? Probably just a bad stocking job by the day crew. He knew the history, of course. Everyone in Galveston did. He knew that during the Great Hurricane of 1900, St. Mary's Orphanage was destroyed, killing 10 nuns and about 90 children. It was a horrible tragedy, a dark chapter in the island's past. But to him, that's all it was, history. Then came the night he couldn't avoid aisle 13. It was late October, and the aisle was already packed with Christmas toys. The regular toy stocker called in sick, and Dave, the no-nonsense manager, gave Alex the assignment. "I need aisle 13 faced and stocked by 4 a May." "No excuses," he said. Alex just nodded. It was just another aisle. The first hour was completely normal. The beep of the scanner, the crinkle of plastic, the hum of the freezers. It was all part of the Job's familiar soundtrack. He worked his way down the aisle, lining up dolls and action figures, making sure every box was perfectly straight. Around 2 a.m., the first weird thing happened. A big red playground ball, which was secured in a wire cage with a bunch of others, suddenly dropped to the floor. It didn't roll, it just fell with a dull thud. Alex stared at it. That was ... odd. He picked it up, shoved it back in the cage, and double-checked the latch. It must have been barely hanging on. He went back to work. Minutes later, he heard a faint giggle. He froze, hand hovering over a box of Legos. He looked up and down the aisle. Nothing. "Just tired," he muttered. But then he felt a pocket of intense cold, like someone had opened a freezer right beside him. He saw his own breath hang in the air for a second, before the feeling vanished. A real chill, not from the AC, crawled up his spine. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see his manager, but he was completely alone. Then things escalated. He was at the far end of the aisle when a stack of board games suddenly slid off the shelf and crashed onto the floor. Alex jumped back, his heart pounding. Nobody was there. The floor hadn't vibrated. They just ... fell. As he bent down to pick them up, a small toy piano on the shelf behind him started playing a tinny, broken version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It played for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped cold. Alex stood up slowly. His skepticism was starting to crack, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. If this story is starting to give you the creeps, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss what happened when Alex decided to confront whatever or whoever was in that aisle with him. Every nerve in Alex's body was screaming at him to get out of there, find his manager, and go home. But some stubborn, logical part of him refused to let him. He was going to finish the job. He tried to explain it all away. A pressure change, faulty wiring in the toy. There had to be an answer. He turned his back on the toys and started breaking down empty cardboard boxes, his movements fast and jerky. That's when he heard it, the sound that would stick with him for years. Bounce, bounce, bounce. It was the sound of a rubber ball on linoleum, coming from the other end of the aisle. He peered down the long corridor of toys, his eyes straining. Nothing. There was no ball. But the sound kept going, slow and deliberate. Bounce, bounce, bounce. And it was getting closer. Sheer panic took over. This wasn't the building. This wasn't the wind. He grabbed his scanner, ready to bolt. And as he turned, it felt like the whole aisle exploded. Dozens of electronic toys switched on at once. A toy fire truck wailed. A talking doll with dead plastic eyes started laughing. A horrible, maniacal sound. Toy cell phones rang with shrill, electronic chirps. It was a wave of terrifying, manufactured joy in the dead of night. He was frozen, trapped in the noise and flashing lights. Then he heard something else underneath it all. A human sound. Faint, disembodied crying. Not just one child, but several. A chorus of pure sorrow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. And then, right next to him, a toy phone on the shelf crackled. A single clear whisper cut through the chaos. It was the voice of a little girl. "Mama?" she asked, her voice full of fear and confusion. Alex's blood ran cold. The history he'd brushed off slammed into him. The hurricane, the orphanage, the stories told of how the nuns, in a desperate act, tied the children to their waists with clothesline to keep them from being swept away, a gesture that proved futile against the storm. Their bodies were found together, a testament to the tragedy. He wasn't just in a haunted Walmart. He was on ground soaked in unimaginable grief. The laughing, the crying, the little girl calling for a mother who could never answer, was all real. The legends were true. Alex didn't scream. He couldn't. The sound was stuck in his throat. He dropped his scanner and he ran. He sprinted down aisle 13, past the laughing dolls and flashing lights, not daring to look back. He flew down the action alley, past pallets of soda and cereal, and didn't stop until he burst through the doors of the break room. He collapsed into a chair, shaking and gasping for air. A few minutes later, Dave, his manager, walked in with a cup of coffee. He took one look at Alex's pale, terrified face and just sighed. He didn't look surprised. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just took a slow sip of coffee and said, "You worked aisle 13 tonight, didn't you?" That calm, knowing question was somehow more terrifying than anything else. It was proof. He wasn't crazy. It wasn't in his head. This was something they all knew about. Over the years, countless employees, from stockers to managers, have reported these same strange events. Alex put in his 2 weeks' notice the next morning. He finished his time working strictly in grocery and never went near aisle 13 again. The Galveston Walmart still stands on Seawall Boulevard, a place where thousands of people shop every week, most of them completely unaware of the tragic history just beneath their feet. But for the overnight employees who walk those silent halls, the store is a constant reminder that some places hold on to the past. The echoes are still there, and sometimes they demand to be heard. The story of the haunted Walmart taps into a fear we can all understand, the idea that the supernatural can break into the most ordinary parts of our lives. What do you think? Have you ever had a scary experience in a normal place? Share your own spooky retail stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this one, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the strange and unexplained. Title: 4 True Warehouse Worker Horror Stories. The scanner in my hand beeps. A package has to be picked and packed every 7 seconds. My manager is hovering nearby, a human stopwatch. You're falling behind, he says. The bathrooms are a 5-minute round trip. You do the math. That isn't a hypothetical. For thousands of workers, it's a daily reality. It's a reality where your own human needs become a liability. We click a button, and the next day, a box just appears on our doorstep. It's like magic. But behind the curtain of that magic is a system of unbelievable pressure, surveillance, and physical punishment. The transportation and warehousing sector has one of the highest rates of serious injury of any industry. And for every accident that gets officially reported, there are countless other stories of hardship and danger that just go unheard. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are people pushed to their breaking point. Today, we're telling 4 of their stories. These are the real-life horrors faced by the people who pay the price for our packages. Story 1. The Man Who Worked Himself to Death. Our first story is about a man who did everything he was supposed to do. Jeff Lockhart Jr. was 29 years old, a husband and a father of 3, working as a temp at a massive fulfillment center in Chester, Virginia. He was a big, strong guy, known for a work ethic that just wouldn't quit. All he wanted was to turn that temp gig into a stable, permanent job to provide for his family. And he figured the only way to do that was to be the best, the fastest, the most dedicated guy on the floor. Jeff pushed his body to the limit to meet the grueling quotas, sometimes walking over 12 miles during a single overnight shift in that 1.1 million square foot facility. His family saw the toll it was taking. He was always exhausted, losing weight at a scary pace. But Jeff just kept pushing, convinced that his hard work would pay off. Then, on January 18, 2013, near the end of another long shift, his body gave out. He was found unconscious on the 3rd floor, collapsed under the massive shelves of products he was paid to pick from. An internal report noted that he was found within 1 minute of his last registered package scan proof that he was working right up to the very last second. He was rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead a short time later. The official cause of death was a heart issue, but to his family and everyone who watched him decline, the real cause was a system that forces workers to trade their health for productivity. Jeff Lockhart Jr. wasn't a statistic. He was a father trying to build a better life, and he was worked to death by a system that only saw him as a number to be optimized. Story 2. The 25-minute wait. When there's a life or death emergency, every single second counts. So what happens when company policy stands in the way of a 911 call? The family of 57-year-old Thomas Becker found out in the worst way imaginable. In January 2017, Thomas was on an early morning shift as a maintenance technician at a fulfillment center in Joliet, Illinois, when he suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed from a massive heart attack. His coworkers heard him beg, "Do not let me die." They immediately told management to call for help. But that 911 call wasn't made right away. Instead of helping the dying man on the floor, management seemed more worried about following procedure. According to a lawsuit filed by his widow, it took a full 25 minutes before anyone called emergency services. And to make an awful situation even worse, the fire station was less than half a mile down the road. When paramedics finally arrived, they hit another delay. Security protocols allegedly made them enter through the front of the enormous 1.5 million square foot building and walk its entire length, instead of just letting them through a loading dock door right next to where Thomas lay. That cost another 5 to 7 precious minutes. During all of this, coworkers noticed that the automated external defibrillator, or AED boxes throughout the warehouse were empty. A working AED could have potentially saved his life. By the time help finally got to Thomas Becker, he had stopped breathing. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. The lawsuit later claimed that right after his death, those empty AED boxes in the warehouse were filled with working units. Thomas Becker didn't have to die, but a catastrophic chain of failures, where rules mattered more than a man's life, sealed his fate. Stories like these are happening every day, often in total silence. The people in these warehouses are our neighbors and our family members. If you've ever had a job with this kind of insane pressure, or if you have your own workplace horror story, share it in the comments below. It's so important to bring these experiences into the light. And if you think these stories need to be heard, please like this video and subscribe for more content that pulls back the curtain. Story 3. The price of a bathroom break. The pressure in these warehouses isn't just about speed. It's about being watched constantly. Every single second is monitored. Workers are tracked through their scanners, which log something called time off task. Any pause, whether it's to ask a manager a question, stretch a sore back, or go to the bathroom, gets recorded. Too much time off task can get you written up or even fired. This creates an atmosphere of pure anxiety and desperation. In warehouses where the bathrooms are a long walk from workstations, a simple human need becomes a risk to your job. One worker said a bathroom break could take 7 minutes, with the walk itself taking 3 minutes each way. When your performance is measured in seconds, that's an eternity. This has led to one of the most degrading and dehumanizing practices in modern work: employees being forced to urinate in bottles or trash cans. A survey of warehouse workers in the UK found that nearly 3/4 of them were scared to use the bathroom because they feared missing their targets. It's a choice between your dignity and your paycheck. And this isn't just a few isolated incidents. It's a systemic issue that comes from a culture that puts efficiency above basic humanity. The constant fear of being punished for something as natural as using the restroom creates a toxic workplace that strips people of their dignity. It's a grim reminder that behind our seamless logistics, there are people being forced to make impossible choices just to keep a job. Story 4. The unseen dangers. Our last story isn't about one single tragedy, but about the terrifying environment that a total lack of accountability can create. It's about what happens when things go wrong and nobody answers for it. A supervisor at a warehouse came in for his shift and found total chaos. Pallets were tipped over, with their contents spilled everywhere. Aisles were littered with crushed boxes of expensive products. And the most disturbing sight? A forklift, parked with one of its steel forks stabbed deep into a structural column of the building. It was a scene of major destruction and a clear sign that a dangerous accident had happened. But when the supervisor tried to investigate, he found nothing. No incident reports were filed. No one was held accountable. He checked the security footage for an answer, but the camera quality was too poor to see who was responsible, or even what exactly took place. The incident was a ghost. There was no explanation, no one to discipline, and no way to put new safety measures in place to stop it from happening again. This is the horror of the unreported accident, the near miss that everyone just ignores. For every huge accident that makes the headlines, safety experts believe there are hundreds of smaller incidents and near misses that go completely unaddressed. When workers are too scared of getting fired to report a mistake, or when the system is so broken that a forklift can ram a support column without anyone noticing, the entire workplace becomes a ticking time bomb. This story shows a terrifying reality. Sometimes the biggest danger isn't the accident itself, but the culture of silence that ensures it will happen again. Conclusion. The slow, grinding exhaustion that leads to a fatal collapse. The bureaucratic delays that turn a medical emergency into a death sentence. The dehumanizing pressure that forces people to give up their basic needs. The systemic chaos that lets danger slide by unchecked. These 4 stories aren't just isolated events. They're symptoms of a much bigger problem. They are the hidden cost of our insatiable demand for instant gratification and next-day delivery. The men and women inside these warehouses work tirelessly, often in dangerous and unforgiving conditions, to power the engine of modern e-commerce. Their stories are a powerful and necessary reminder that convenience should never, ever come at the cost of human dignity, health, or safety. The next time a package shows up at your door with impossible speed, just take a second to think about the journey it took and the human hands that made it all possible. Thank you for watching. If these stories resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video to help raise awareness about these critical issues. We read every single one of your comments, and we truly believe that sharing these experiences is the first step toward real change. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one. Most disturbing security footage that science can't explain security cameras are everywhere. They're meant to catch thieves and keep us honest, but every now and then, they capture something that just doesn't add up. Something that logic can't easily explain away. From shadowy figures in historic buildings to strange creatures caught in a driveway, this is the kind of footage that sparks endless debate. Today, we're looking at 4 of the most chilling and controversial clips ever to hit the internet. Kicking things off, we head to the wooded hills of Moorhead, Kentucky. In July of 2022, a home security camera recorded a clip that quickly went viral. The video shows a pale, thin, human-like figure moving with a strange, cautious walk. It creeps toward a parked car, hunched over, before stopping to look around, its movements just off. The video, posted by Paranormality magazine, blew up online, sparking a huge debate. The figure is stark white, almost glowing in the camera's night vision. Its limbs seem long, and its gait is unnervingly unnatural. You can even hear someone in the original video say, "You can see his face clearly." So what was it? Theories ran wild. Some pointed to local Appalachian folklore, suggesting it was a cryptid, a creature of legend, like Bigfoot or the Mothman. Others thought its proportions looked more alien, like the classic gray archetype caught on a late-night stroll. Of course, there are more down-to-earth explanations. The most popular theory is that it was just a person in a white morph suit pulling a prank. Skeptics noted the shaky camera work, suggesting someone was filming a screen, which makes manipulation easier. Others argued that infrared cameras can make dark clothing appear white. Adding to the skepticism, the original owners of the footage reportedly declined to be interviewed unless they were paid. So, was it a cleverly designed hoax? Or did a camera in a quiet Kentucky town accidentally record something truly unknown? The footage is just blurry enough to keep people guessing, and just clear enough to be creepy. Next, we're off to London, to a place drowning in history and tragedy, Hampton Court Palace. This former home of King Henry VIII has ghost stories baked into its walls, but in the winter of 2003, security cameras caught something that gave those old legends a modern twist. The story goes that for 3 days in a row, a heavy set of fire doors in an exhibition area kept flying open with incredible force. Security staff were baffled. On the first day, the CCTV footage showed the doors bursting open, but nothing was there. The next day, it happened again. But this time, the camera caught a tall, gaunt figure in what looked like period clothing emerging from the doorway. The figure, nicknamed Skeletor by the media, calmly closed the doors and vanished. On the third day, the doors flew open again, but the mysterious doorkeeper was gone. The footage became an international sensation. So what was the deal? The leading skeptical theory is that it was a historical reenactor. The palace employs actors in period costumes, and it's plausible one of them, maybe annoyed by a draft, simply shut the doors, not knowing a camera was rolling. But that doesn't quite explain the force that threw the doors open in the first place, which some have attributed to environmental or mechanical quirks. The palace itself has never officially debunked the footage, presenting it as a genuine mystery. Was it the ghost of Henry VIII, or another of the palace's many reported spirits? Or was it just an actor in the right place at the wrong time? It's one thing to hear ghost stories. It's another to see a silent figure appear on a modern camera, perform an action, and fade back into history. Before we get to our top 2, if you're enjoying these mysteries, Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. Now we're back in the US, in the small city of La Junta, Colorado, for a clip that's as weird as it is short. In June 2019, homeowner Vivian Gomez checked her security camera and found something so bizarre it became a global phenomenon. The video shows a small, stick-thin figure with what looks like large, floppy ears and an odd, jerky walk. It does a weird, chicken-like strut down the driveway and then disappears. The internet immediately compared it to Dobby the house elf from Harry Potter, and the name stuck. Vivian Gomez swore the footage was real and unaltered. The internet, predictably, exploded with theories. Was it an alien? A prank? Or Dobby himself, on vacation in Colorado? The most common skeptical take is that the figure is actually Gomez's young son. The theory suggests the boy was just playing outside, maybe with underwear on his head, creating the floppy ears illusion. Inside Edition even had the boy, Bobby, try to recreate the dance with underwear on his head. While there were some similarities, both he and his mom insisted he was inside at the time. A forensic video analyst who reviewed the clip for Inside Edition said there was no evidence of digital tampering. He did, however, state that the most likely explanation was something normal being distorted by the infrared camera, though he admitted the resemblance to Dobby was uncanny. It's a classic case of a few seconds of grainy footage creating a mystery that's more fun to believe than to solve. Our number one spot goes to a video that has become a legend of internet horror. The story is set on September 14th, 2003, at a Wingate hotel in Illinois, but it didn't go viral until years later. It all started with guests complaining about terrifying screams coming from an empty room 209. Security footage shows a guard, identified as John, going to investigate. As he approaches, you can faintly hear the screams on the recording. He unlocks the door and steps inside. What happens next is what made this clip famous. Just as John enters, a faint, human-shaped mist is seen exiting the room and drifting down the hall. On the audio, you hear John radio his manager in a panic, describing a scene of chaos. The carpet is ripped up, furniture is overturned, and the shower is running, all in a supposedly empty room. However, the authenticity of this video is highly questionable. The original YouTube uploader, Jiminate22, claimed they couldn't name the specific hotel for legal reasons, a classic red flag for a hoax. Further investigation has revealed that the creator of the video is likely a filmmaker named Turner Clay, and the clip was a promotional film or short horror project. In the credits of one of his films, The Blackwell Ghost, he gives a special thanks to John and Jiminate22, Ghost Screaming in Haunted Hotel, strongly indicating it was a staged production. Despite being widely considered a fake, the Wingate Hotel video remains one of the most effective and unsettling pieces of found footage on the internet. It's a masterclass in building tension, and a perfect example of how a well-crafted story can become a modern ghost legend. From convincing hoaxes to genuinely puzzling clips, this kind of footage taps into our fear of the unknown. They're the glitches in our 24/7 surveillance world, leaving us to debate what's real, what's fake, and what might be lurking just out of sight. What do you think is going on in these videos? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to Halfway Dark. 3 factory graveyard shift stories you won't believe. Every factory has a rhythm, doesn't it? A pulse that keeps beating long after the day's shift has gone home. There's the hum of cooling machinery, the groan of settling metal, the drip of condensation in those vast, empty spaces. But on the graveyard shift, when the building is practically a tomb and the silence is absolute, sometimes you can hear something else. The sound of stories trapped in the walls, of memories playing out on a loop in the dark. These places aren't what you see in the daylight. At night, a factory becomes a maze of shadows, a place where the line between your imagination and whatever's really out there gets awfully blurry. For the worker walking the floor alone, every unexpected noise becomes a footstep. Every flicker of a distant light becomes a pair of eyes, watching. Tonight, we have 3 stories for workers who clocked in for their shift, having no idea they wouldn't be alone. These are 3 factory graveyard shift stories you won't believe. Story 1. The haunting warning at the Tennessee factory. Our first story comes from a guy named John, who took a job at an old factory in rural Tennessee. The work was simple, the pay was good, and honestly, the quiet of the night shift suited him. The factory made heavy-duty parts for industrial equipment, so the main floor was this massive cavern of presses, lathes, and conveyor belts, all of them sitting silent and imposing in the gloom. For the first few weeks, the job was exactly what he expected. Quiet, maybe a little boring, and lonely. But that loneliness was about to turn into a different kind of feeling, a much more unsettling one. It started small. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A sound that was just a little out of place, a metallic scrape from a part of the factory he knew was totally empty. He'd just shake his head and blame it on being tired and isolated. But then came the feeling. A sudden, crushing sense of dread that would just wash over him for no reason. It was a cold, heavy presence, like a storm cloud gathering in the room, making the hair on his arms stand right up. One night, while making his rounds, the feeling was worse than ever before. The air felt thick and cold, and the normal hum of the factory just stopped, dead silence. That's when he heard it, clear as day. Footsteps, echoing from the far end of the empty floor. Heavy, rhythmic steps, like steel-toed boots on concrete. But he was the only one there. He called out, his voice sounding tiny and weak in the huge space. The footsteps stopped. A second later, he heard a whisper, a faint hissing sound that seemed to weave its way between the silent machines. His heart was hammering his ribs. He grabbed his heavy flashlight, its beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. He walked slowly toward where the sounds came from, a section of the floor with a massive hydraulic press. As he got closer, a shape peeled itself away from the shadows of the machine. It was a tall, dark figure, a silhouette of a man that seemed to drink the light around it. John froze, his breath caught in his throat. The shadow figure darted with this unnatural speed, weaving between the machines before it just dissolved into the darkness. He stood there for a long time, just him and the beam of his own flashlight, his mind scrambling to understand what he'd just seen. The next morning, still shaken, he tracked down one of the daytime supervisors, an older guy who'd worked there for over 30 years. John hesitated, not wanting to sound like he was losing it, but finally told him what happened. The supervisor's friendly face just fell. He told John that years ago, a worker had been killed in a terrible accident at that exact hydraulic press. The man was working a double, completely exhausted, and he made one fatal mistake. Ever since, rumors have been passed around by the old-timers. Other night shift workers over the years had reported the exact same things. That sudden feeling of dread, the phantom footsteps, and a glimpse of a shadow darting between the machines. They believed it was the ghost of the worker, forever walking his final shift. John never finished his next one. What an unsettling thought. It seems some spirits just can't bring themselves to clock out. Our next story takes us to a large foundry, where one worker found out that the scariest things on the night shift aren't always ghosts. Story 2. The Silent Intruders and the Rolling Barrel. For a maintenance worker at a huge foundry, the graveyard shift was its own little world. The daytime noise of grinding, smelting, and machinery was gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. All you'd hear were the groans of cooling metal and the distant hum of vents. He and his partner were used to the strange knocks and bangs of the building settling around them. They learned to ignore it. But one morning, a look at the security footage turned that casual attitude into pure, chilling fear. The tape from the night before showed two figures, armed and dressed in black, moving like ghosts through the shadows of the foundry. They had been inside the factory with the two workers for hours, hiding among the machinery, just watching. The maintenance worker and his buddy had been completely oblivious, doing their rounds while, just feet away, a very real and violent threat was lying in wait. The intruders were never caught, and no one ever figured out what they wanted. The sheer dumb luck that they hadn't run into them, that a deadly confrontation had been avoided, was terrifying. Suddenly, the fear wasn't about ghosts anymore. It was about the very real dangers lurking in the isolation of the night. But the factory wasn't done with him. A few weeks later, he was working a shift alone. There'd been a small accident earlier, and a bunch of barrels and crates had toppled over. After he finished cleaning up, he stood for a moment in the silence. And then, from across the floor, one of the heavy steel barrels started to move. It didn't just tip. It rolled slowly and deliberately across the concrete. It moved in a perfectly straight line, like an invisible hand was guiding it, before it came to a gentle stop right next to his feet. He stared at it, frozen. There was no slope, no vibration, nothing that could possibly explain it. As he stood there, a new sound came from a dark storage area nearby. A faint, ethereal female voice. It was just a whisper, too soft to make out words, but it was a voice. The combination of the real-world terror he'd just been through and this blatant, impossible event was just too much. His heart pounding, he checked the security cameras later. The footage was undeniable. It clearly showed the barrel rolling across the empty floor with absolutely nothing near it. That was his last graveyard shift. The psychological toll was too much, and the company, freaked out by the footage and the story of the intruders, got rid of the solo graveyard shift soon after. He quit not long after that, unable to shake the feeling of being watched by both the living and the dead. That feeling of being watched is a unique kind of fear, one that only comes from being alone in a place that's supposed to be full of life. If these stories are getting under your skin, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe for more true, unsettling stories. And if you have a story of your own that the world needs to hear, you can submit it to the email in the description below. Story 3. The Elevator That Waits. Our final story isn't one of abject terror, but of a quiet, persistent, and deeply weird phenomenon that messed with a factory worker for months. This guy worked in a multi-story manufacturing plant, and his job meant he had to use the building's old industrial freight elevator all the time. Soon after he started, he noticed something odd. Multiple times, as he'd be walking toward the elevator at night, the heavy steel doors would just slide open right before he got there, as if someone inside saw him coming and hit the button. But every single time, the elevator car was completely empty. At first, he chalked it up to coincidence or a faulty sensor, but it just kept happening, and only for him. He'd be walking down the long, empty hall, and like clockwork, just as he was a few feet away, ding, the doors would part, revealing the vacant, dimly lit car. It was so punctual, it was unnerving, almost polite. It got to the point where he started to expect it, like a strange, silent greeting from the building itself. One night, things got even stranger. He was walking toward the elevator when he saw, through the small wire mesh window in the door, the silhouette of a person inside. Relieved that there was finally a rational explanation, he picked up his pace and called out, "Hey, can you hold the door?" Right as he reached it, the doors, which had started to close, slid back open. He stepped inside, ready to thank the other person, but the elevator was empty. He was completely alone. He just stood there, confused and seriously unnerved. He had seen someone. It wasn't a glance. It was the clear shape of a person standing right where he was now. Thoroughly spooked, he went to security the next day and asked them to pull the camera footage. What they found defied all logic. The tape showed the employee, walking toward the elevator and calling out. The doors opened for him, exactly like he said. But a few moments before he got there, the footage showed something else. The elevator had arrived, the doors had opened, and a mysterious figure wearing a trench coat and an old-fashioned fedora stepped out. The figure walked calmly down the hall and straight out of the building. The security team played it back again and again. No one on staff knew who it was. There was no record of a visitor, and no one dressed like that had worked in the factory for decades. After that, the staff started joking about it. They called the entity the polite ghost, an apparition that haunted the elevator and was always willing to hold the door. But for the worker who lived it, it wasn't a joke. It was a constant, unsettling reminder that in the dead quiet of the factory night, you might be alone, but something is always watching. Conclusion. So the next time you're alone on the late shift, when the building settles around you and the machinery sighs in the darkness, remember these stories. Remember the phantom footsteps in Tennessee, the silent intruders in the foundry, and the polite ghost in the elevator. And listen closely to the whispers of the factory. You might be surprised by what you hear. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share your own experiences in the comments below, and subscribe for more tales from the dark. Title: 4 True Restaurant Employee Horror Stories. The restaurant was finally empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was still being watched. He'd been staring for the better part of an hour, long after his plate was cleared. Now, standing in the empty, dimly lit parking lot after my closing shift, I saw his car, idling in the far corner. The second I opened my door, his headlights sliced through the darkness, and his engine revved. My shift was over, but my nightmare was just beginning. What you just heard is a glimpse into one of the 4 terrifying, true stories we're sharing today. These are real accounts from restaurant workers who clocked in for a totally normal shift, but ended up living through a nightmare. Look, the service industry has its share of rude customers and rough days. We've all heard those stories. But sometimes an encounter goes way beyond rude. It turns hostile, threatening, and genuinely dangerous. From a violent assault over a sandwich to a terrifying chase in the dead of night, these are the stories of what can happen when a customer crosses the line. Story 1. The Holiday Nightmare. Our first story takes us to Savannah, Georgia, during the St. Patrick's Day rush. We'll call the waitress Chloe. If you've never been to Savannah for St. Patty's, let me just say, they take the holiday very seriously. We're talking massive crowds, wild parties, and a river of alcohol flowing through the streets, and of course, the restaurants. The day was a blur of green beer, loud tourists, and an endless parade of food orders. The energy was chaotic, but fun, and even with the stress, Chloe and the crew were handling it. That is, until one man's temper turned the party into a scene of unbelievable violence. He was with a large, rowdy group and had ordered a Reuben sandwich. When Chloe brought it to him, he immediately started complaining. He said it was made wrong. The meat was dry. It was the worst sandwich he'd ever seen. Chloe did exactly what you're supposed to do. She apologized and offered to get him something else, or have the kitchen remake it. But this guy wasn't looking for a solution. He wanted a fight. His voice got louder, his face turning beet red. He started personally insulting Chloe, his words sharp enough to cut through the din of the packed restaurant. Before she could even process what was happening or call for a manager, he did something nobody saw coming. He shot up from his chair, grabbed her arm with one hand, and took the sandwich in the other. Then he violently shoved it right in her face, grinding the sauerkraut and dressing into her skin and hair as he screamed at her. For a second, the entire restaurant just froze. The happy chaos vanished, replaced by a stunned, dead silence. Chloe was in total shock, humiliated, and covered in greasy food. The man's own friends just stared, dumbfounded. When reality finally crashed back in, the staff jumped into action. The bartender and a bouncer grabbed the man, and literally dragged him out of the restaurant while he was still shouting and struggling. Chloe was left shaking, trying to wipe the mess off her face. The festive mood was completely shattered, replaced by fear and vulnerability. It was a horrifying reminder of how fast a customer's anger, especially when fueled by alcohol, can explode into a physical assault, leaving an employee not just shaken, but actually hurt. Story 2. Public humiliation. Being a hostess is often a thankless job. You're the first person every customer sees, and you're the one who has to break the bad news about wait times. That means you often take the full force of their frustration. For a young hostess working a busy Friday night, this became painfully clear. Let's call her Sarah. She was working at a popular chain restaurant right next to a movie theater, so on weekends, the place was an absolute madhouse with the pre- and post-movie crowds. On this Friday, the restaurant was packed to the gills, with a line of people waiting out the door. A man walked in with his wife and 5 children, marched right up to the hostess stand, and announced, "Table for 7. No, hello, nothing." Sarah gave him a polite, apologetic smile and told him the truth. The wait was going to be about 40 minutes. The man's face instantly went dark. 40 minutes? He scoffed, like she'd just personally insulted his entire family. He started to argue, insisting they couldn't possibly wait that long and that she needed to seat them right now. Sarah patiently explained again that there were no open tables large enough for his party and that other groups were already ahead of him. His response wasn't just angry, it was vicious. In front of his wife, his kids, and a lobby full of strangers, he leaned in close to this teenage girl and snarled, "Go F*CK yourself." The words just hung there in the air, sharp and ugly. Sarah was stunned. She was just a kid doing her job, and a grown man had just verbally attacked her with a level of hatred that came out of nowhere. His wife looked horrified, pulling on his arm and telling him to stop, but he just shook her off. He shot Sarah one last hateful glare before turning and storming out, his family trailing behind him in silence. The lobby was quiet. Everyone had heard it. Sarah just stood there, her face burning with shock and shame. She felt small, degraded, and targeted for something that was completely out of her control. The whole thing was over in less than a minute, but that feeling of being publicly humiliated stuck with her for the rest of the night. Raw reminder of the kind of hostility service workers are forced to swallow. Stories like these are a harsh reminder of the frightening and unpredictable things restaurant employees go through every single day. If these accounts are hitting home for you, please take a second to subscribe and hit that like button. And if you have a story of your own you think we should hear, send it to the email in the description below. Now, let's get back to it. Story 3. The customer who wouldn't leave. Closing time at a restaurant can be really eerie. The dining room that was once buzzing with noise goes quiet. The lights dim down, and the small crew left cleaning up is pretty isolated. That's when you can feel the most vulnerable, as a worker named Mark found out during one deeply unsettling shift. The last customer of the night was a guy who'd been sitting by himself for hours, nursing the same single cup of coffee. At first, there wasn't anything obviously threatening about him, just a weird, quiet intensity. He wasn't on his phone. He was just staring off into space, and it was making the staff feel a little on edge. As closing time rolled around, Mark's manager did the usual polite walk-through, letting the man know they were closing up soon. The man just nodded, didn't say a word. 10 minutes later, the doors are locked, the music is off, and the only people left are Mark, his manager, and the customer, who still hadn't budged. The manager went over again, this time a little more firmly. "Sir, we're closed. You have to leave now." This time, the man looked up, and his blank expression twisted into something agitated. "I'll leave when I'm ready," he said, his voice quiet but cold. Things escalated quickly. The manager insisted, the customer refused, and his behavior got more and more erratic. He started muttering to himself, making these wild gestures. Mark, who was cleaning nearby, felt a pit of dread forming in his stomach. This wasn't just a stubborn customer anymore. Something was wrong. Finally, following protocol, the manager told the man that if he didn't leave, they were calling the police. That seemed to work. The man shot up from his chair, knocking it over. He glared at both of them with pure menace in his eyes, then slowly stalked towards the door. The manager unlocked it, held it open, and the man stepped out into the night. They both let out a huge sigh of relief. But as the manager went to lock the door again, the man whipped around and slammed his hands against the glass, his face contorted with rage. He started screaming threats, promising he'd be waiting for them in the parking lot. They were locked inside, but they didn't feel safe at all. They felt trapped, watching this disturbed, unpredictable person who now knew they were alone. They called the police immediately, not daring to step outside until they saw the flashing lights of a cruiser pull into the lot. The customer was long gone by then, but the fear he'd left behind wasn't. He had turned their workplace into a prison, a terrifying reminder that a locked door doesn't always keep the danger out. Story 4. The Long Drive Home. Our last story is the one we teased in the beginning. It comes from a server we'll call Jessica, and it shows how a threat at work can follow you home, turning a routine drive into an absolute nightmare. It started with a customer who made her skin crawl all night. He sat alone at a corner table, and from the second she greeted him, his eyes were locked on her with this unnerving focus. He stayed long after he'd finished eating, just watching her every move as she took care of other tables. She tried to brush it off as just another weirdo, but she couldn't shake a deep feeling of unease. When it was time to close, her manager left, leaving Jessica to finish her final tasks alone. The man finally paid his bill and left. As she locked the front doors, she glanced across the dark parking lot and saw him. He wasn't leaving. He was just sitting in his car, parked in the shadows at the far end of the lot. A wave of pure fear washed over her. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or on the phone. She flew through her closing duties, her heart hammering in her chest. Grabbing her keys, she took a shaky breath and stepped out into the cold night. The instant she unlocked her car, his headlights flashed on, pinning her in a sudden, blinding glare. His engine revved. There was no doubt anymore. He was waiting for her. She dove into her car, slammed the locks, and peeled out of the parking lot, not daring to look back. But when she glanced in her rearview mirror, her worst fear was confirmed. His headlights were right there. He was following her. Panic took over. She was on a dark, nearly deserted road, miles from home. There was no way she could lead him there. She started making random turns, desperate to lose him, but he stuck to her, sometimes getting so close she thought he'd hit her bumper. Her mind was racing, flashing through every horror story she'd ever heard. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone, but she managed to dial 911. In a choked, panicked voice, she explained that a customer from work was chasing her, and she was terrified. The dispatcher on the other end told her to stay on the line and drive straight to the nearest police station, guiding her with directions. With the dispatcher's calm voice in her ear, she focused on one thing: driving, getting to safety. The man was still right behind her, relentless. But as she followed the dispatcher's route and got closer to town, she saw them, the blessed sight of flashing red and blue lights in the distance. She pulled into the police station lot like she was told, and the car that had been hunting her suddenly swerved and sped off into the darkness. Jessica just sat in her car, sobbing and shaking, as an officer walked up to her window. She was safe, but the terror of being hunted like that stuck with her. It was a harrowing reminder that for some people, the danger doesn't stop when you clock out. Conclusion: the stories you heard tonight aren't just entertainment. They're the real experiences of people in an industry that most of us use all the time. They shine a light on the courage of employees who have to deal with verbal abuse, physical assault, and terrifying stalking, often with little to no protection. It's a side of customer service that is too often ignored or brushed aside. Thank you for listening. If you found these stories compelling, please consider subscribing for more. We also encourage you to share your own experiences in the comments or through our email. Stay safe. Title: 5 Chilling Stories from a Casino Security Guard That They Don't Want You to Know. You've seen the movies, right? The slick security guards in sharp suits, handling card counters and drama like it's nothing. I'm here to tell you, the real job is much, much darker. I was a casino security guard for 5 years, and what I saw wasn't glamorous. It was a front row seat to the quiet desperation that the flashing lights and constant noise are meant to hide. These aren't just ghost stories. These are the things that got under my skin and forced me to walk away for good. These are the 5 stories the casinos pray you'll never hear. Story 1. The Man Who Wasn't There. The casino floor is designed to make you lose track of everything: time, your money, even yourself. There are no clocks and no windows, just a maze of blinking lights and the sound of winning, even when nearly everyone is losing. But one night, we lost track of a person. A pit boss called it in from a high-limit blackjack table. A player, a quiet guy in a wrinkled suit, had been sitting there for hours. He'd been nursing the same drink, making the same small bet every single hand. The dealer said he got up to go to the restroom and just never came back. His chips were still on the table, next to a half-full glass of whiskey. Now, this isn't totally crazy. People wander off. My job was simple: find him. I checked the restrooms. Nothing. I walked through the bars, the restaurants, the main hotel lobby. My partner started checking the casino floor. We pulled up the security tapes. We saw him stand up, push in his chair, and walk toward the main walkway. And then, right at a spot where 4 camera angles meet, he just vanished. He's there in one frame, gone the next. He didn't turn left. He didn't turn right. It was like he was just swallowed by the crowd. We spent the next 4 hours looking for him. We checked every exit, every stairwell, every single elevator. We asked other guards, waitresses, janitors. Nobody saw him. It was as if the building itself just ate him. Eventually, his chips were collected, his drink was cleared, and the game moved on. We never found him. No one ever called looking for him. No missing person report was ever filed. Just a ghost story without the ghost. It showed me what a casino really is. A place where you can completely disappear, and the only thing anyone cares about is the empty seat that needs to be filled. Story 2. The sound of indifference. The thing that really got under my skin, day after day, was the raw grip of addiction. It's usually a quiet kind of horror you see on people's faces as they stare at the spinning reels. But one afternoon, that horror got deafeningly loud. An elderly man playing a dollar slot machine slumped over in his chair. It was a massive heart attack. Instant, his wife started screaming. I was there in under 30 seconds, my partner right behind me with the defibrillator. We pulled him onto the floor and started CPR. It was chaotic, desperate, and brutal. I was doing chest compressions, counting out loud, sweat dripping from my face, while my partner tried to get a clear shock with the paddles. And all around us, the casino just kept going. The woman at the machine right next to this dying man didn't even look up. She just kept sliding bills into the slot. A guy playing video poker behind me actually complained that we were being distracting. 2 players at a blackjack table asked a manager if we could move the man, because he was, and I quote, disrupting their game. That's the sound that haunts me. It's not the wife's screams. It's the thump-thump of my hands on his chest, set to a soundtrack of cheerful electronic jingles. A man's life was ending, and dozens of people just feet away chose to ignore it, completely lost in their own world. The paramedics got there, but it was too late. As they wheeled his body away under a white sheet, a woman literally stepped over the gurney to cash in her ticket. I saw the amount, $25. Story 3. The High Roller's Secret. In casino security, you deal with all kinds of people. Drunks, cheats, sore losers, the usual. You are never, ever prepared for something that feels like it was ripped from a federal briefing. We had this high roller, a guy who booked our most expensive penthouse suite for a week. He was quiet, polite, and tipped everyone well. The strange thing was, he didn't gamble much. Said he was in town for business. On day 4, a housekeeper went in to clean his suite and got a bad feeling. She called us, saying the room felt heavy and that the guest insisted she not touch any of his bags. My supervisor and I went up to do a welfare check. We knocked, announced ourselves, and when no one answered, we used our master key. The suite was spotless, but in the corner were 4 huge heavy-duty Pelican cases. Against the rules, my supervisor decided we had to look. He popped the latches on one. Inside, sitting in perfectly cut foam, were multiple handguns and a serious amount of ammo. My heart started pounding. We backed out of the room, sealed off the floor, and called the authorities. A bomb squad and federal agents showed up. What they found was terrifying. The cases didn't just have guns. They had materials for making bombs. But the scariest thing was on his laptop. He had digital blueprints of the casino's ventilation system, our security patrol routes, and hours of surveillance footage of the security staff, of me. This guy wasn't a high roller. He was doing reconnaissance for an attack. We had smiled at him, served him, and walked right past him for days, with no idea we were his targets. That's when I realized the biggest threat in a casino isn't always losing your money. Sometimes it's just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Story 4. The game within the game. Everyone thinks they know how people cheat in casinos. They picture card counters from the movies or some big Ocean's 11 heist. The truth is stranger than that. We saw teams using complex signals at poker tables and gadgets that would blow your mind. We caught guys with tiny cameras hidden in their sleeves, streaming the dealer's cards to a partner miles away who'd feed them the right moves through a tiny vibrating device. We even busted a crew that used a laser scanner in a phone to calculate the speed of the roulette ball and predict the landing zone. But the one that really destroyed my faith in the whole system didn't involve a player. It involved one of our own. There was a baccarat dealer, a guy who'd been on the floor for over a decade. The house profits at his table were consistently, almost impossibly, high. Management loved the guy. But then, surveillance got an anonymous tip. They watched him for weeks, going over the footage frame by frame, and they found it, a false shuffle. It was a move so clean, so subtle, it was almost invisible. He could perform what looked like a perfect shuffle while keeping a specific group of cards in order, ready to be dealt to his partner at the table. It was a classic, old-school sleight of hand trick, done perfectly under hundreds of cameras. When they pulled him into the office, he didn't even try to deny it. He just smiled. He told them that after 20 years of watching people lose their homes and their families for the casino's bottom line, he figured it was his turn to take a cut. He said he saw the whole system as rigged to begin with a machine built to prey on weakness. He was just playing the game within the game. They fired him and pressed charges, obviously. But what he said stuck with me. Is it still cheating if you believe the whole game is a lie? Story 5. The Long Fall. This is the last story I'm going to tell. This is the one that made me put my badge on the desk and never set foot in a casino again. It's not about a crime or some elaborate cheating scheme. It's about the last, desperate act of a person who was pushed way past their limit. We got a call a jumper on the West parking garage. It's the call you pray you never get. I was one of the first ones there. A woman, maybe in her late 50s, was standing on the ledge of the top floor, 9 stories up. She was just staring down at the city lights. She had lost everything. Not just her money for the night. Everything. Her savings, her retirement, her house. All of it fed into the machines over the last year. We tried talking to her. My partner was a trained negotiator, and he was incredibly calm, gentle, reassuring. He talked to her for almost an hour, and the whole time I could hear the faint, cheerful ringing of slot machines from the casino below. For a second, I thought he had her. She took a step back from the edge. My partner told her, "It's okay. We can help you." She looked right at him, and with the deepest sadness I have ever seen in my life, she said, "No, you can't. This is the only way I can stop." And she jumped. I will never forget that sound, or that sight, or the feeling of being completely and utterly useless. But the thing that truly broke me was what happened next. After the scene was secured, and the authorities were handling the aftermath, my supervisor came over. He put a hand on my shoulder, but not to comfort me. It was to give me an order. He told me to make sure the entrance from the garage to the casino floor was cleared, because the incident was creating a bottleneck, and guests were complaining they couldn't get to the tables. In that single moment, I saw the whole ugly picture. We weren't security. We were custodians for the machine. A machine that grinds people up and spits them out, and our job was just to clean up the mess so it could keep running. That woman wasn't just a victim of addiction. She was a casualty of an industry that turns hope into profit, no matter what it costs. I walked into my supervisor's office the next morning and quit. I didn't have to give a reason. He already knew. I'm telling you these stories because the bright lights are a mask, and the truth underneath is a darkness most people refuse to see. I will never gamble again. Not because I'm afraid of losing money, but because I've seen what the real stakes are. I've seen the price people pay, and I'm not willing to be a part of it anymore. If any of this resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe for more truths from behind the curtain. I'm sure some of you have your own stories about the dark side of seemingly glamorous places. Share them in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and remember what's actually valuable. Title: 5 Terrifying Night Shift Worker Encounters. There's a different world that wakes up after midnight. While most of us are tucked away in our beds, a whole other workforce is out there keeping things running. They're the clerks, the security guards, the lone attendants working in the quietest hours of the day. But that silence, it can hide some truly unsettling and straight-up dangerous things. From a phantom scream that you were never meant to hear, to a hotel guest who isn't what they seem. These are 5 terrifying encounters from night shift workers who looked into the shadows and realized something was looking right back. Our first story is from a security guard, Martin, who patrolled a huge isolated industrial park miles from anywhere. His job was pretty much routine and total isolation. He'd walk the perimeter, check the locks, and just watch the hours crawl by in the dead silence of the countryside at night. The whole property was surrounded by a tall fence with just one long gated driveway. It was the kind of place where the only sounds you should hear are the ones you make yourself. But one night, while he was doing his final round near the main office, a sound sliced through the quiet. It was faint at first, but it was unmistakable. A woman screaming for help. The sound was coming from the far end of that long driveway, just outside the gate, and this wasn't just a yell. It was raw, desperate terror. Martin's training kicked in, but so did this gut-wrenching feeling of dread. He sprinted towards the gate, his heart pounding. Was it a car wreck? An attack? He reached the gate, hand on the latch, but a cold thought stopped him dead. The road outside was pitch black. No headlights, no crashed car, nothing. Just those desperate cries echoing out of the darkness. He yelled out, But the only answer was another scream that would curdle your blood. That's when he realized how wrong this all felt. It felt staged. It felt like a trap. Instead of throwing the gate open and running out there, he slowly backed away, trying to scan the darkness. He got back to the security office, locked the door, and called the police. As he was on the phone explaining what was happening, the screams outside just stopped. The night went completely silent again. Multiple officers, even a helicopter with a searchlight, showed up. They scoured the area for over an hour, the road, the ditches, the woods nearby. They found nothing. No woman, no attacker, no footprints. Not a single sign anyone had been there. The official report just called it an unexplained occurrence. But Martin knows what he heard, and he's still convinced that scream was a lure, designed to draw him out of that fenced-in property and into an ambush. Section 2. The doppelganger customers. This next one is just bizarre. It comes from a fast food worker we'll call Megan. She was on the graveyard shift when the only customers are usually truckers or tired travelers. The restaurant was empty, lit up by those sterile fluorescent lights that make everything feel a little off after 2 a.m. around 3 a.m. The front door chimed, and a young couple walked in. They were wearing dark, layered clothes and had this quiet, almost nervous vibe. Megan took their order, just 2 black coffees. As she was making them, she watched the couple sit down in a boothway in the back corner of the silent dining room. A few moments later, the drive-through sensor beeped. She put on her headset and heard a car pull up, but when she glanced at the monitor, her blood ran cold. In the car was the exact same couple she had just served inside. The same faces, same hair, same dark clothes. They were just sitting there, staring blankly into the camera. Confused and completely terrified, Megan just froze. In the reflection on the monitor, she could still see the first couple sitting in the corner booth. How could they be in 2 places at once? Her brain just couldn't make sense of it. The man in the drive-thru ordered 2 black coffees. His voice was flat, robotic, and identical to the man inside. Shaking, Megan handed the coffees out the window. The couple in the car didn't say a word. They just took the drinks and drove off into the night without even turning on their headlights. Megan immediately spun around to look at the booth where the first couple was. It was empty. Their 2 coffee cups were still on the table, completely full. She ran to the front door and looked out, but the parking lot was empty. There was no sign of them. When she told her manager later that morning, he was skeptical, but agreed to check the security footage. The tape confirmed everything. It showed the first couple come in and sit down. It showed the second, identical couple in the drive-thru. But the weirdest part? The camera never caught the first couple leaving. Okay, gotta pause for a second. If these stories are giving you the chills, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more. And if you've got a terrifying night shift story of your own, we'd seriously love to hear it. Our email is in the description below. Send it over for a chance to be featured in a future video. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Section 3. The Hotel Room Horror. All right, our third story comes from a night auditor at a mid-sized hotel. If you don't know, the night audit shift is usually dead quiet. You're just balancing accounts and handling the odd late check-in. But on this one night, the quiet was completely shattered. Around 1 a.m., a front desk phone rang. It was a guest, his voice low and worried. He was reporting loud, scary noises from the room next door, a room that, according to the hotel system, was supposed to be empty. The auditor, a young guy named Chris, felt a jolt of alarm. He called up his security guard, an older, more experienced guy, to go with him. Together, they went to the 4th floor. As they got closer to the room, they could hear it too, muffled sobs and a man's voice, low and menacing. The security guard knocked hard on the door and announced who they were. The sounds inside stopped instantly. After a few seconds of tense silence, they used the master key to open the door. What they found inside was an absolute nightmare. A woman was huddled in the corner of the dark room, her face bloody and covered in tears. Near the window, a tall, scary-looking man appeared from the bathroom, his face twisted with rage at being discovered. Before Chris or the guard could even move, the man lunged. Thankfully, the security guard managed to tackle him, and a fight broke out. Chris rushed over to the woman and immediately called 911. The police were there in minutes and got the attacker under control. The story that came out later was just horrifying. The man was a serial predator who had a history of sneaking into hotels. He'd find empty rooms and just wait for an unsuspecting guest or housekeeper. The police figured he'd targeted this woman when she'd left her door ajar for just a moment. They said that the guest's call and the quick thinking of the hotel staff almost certainly saved her life. It's a terrifying reminder that sometimes the monsters are all too real. Section 4. The Vanishing Clerk. This next one isn't about ghosts or phantoms. This is a terrifying and very real mystery that's still unsolved. It's about the disappearance of Jessica Hiringa, a 25-year-old mother working the late shift at a gas station in Norton Shores, Michigan. On the night of April 26, 2013, Jessica was working alone, getting ready to close up the Exxon station. It was a routine she knew well, in an area where people generally felt safe. Just before she was supposed to close at 11 p.m., a regular customer pulled in. He knew right away something was off. The lights were on, and the door was unlocked, but the store was empty. The cash register was open, and Jessica's purse and coat were still behind the counter. But Jessica was gone. The customer called the police immediately. As the investigation started, a chilling picture began to form. There were no signs of a fight, and nothing valuable had been taken. It was like she just vanished. Investigators checked the security tapes, but the cameras somehow missed the moment she disappeared. The biggest clue came from another witness who saw a silver minivan parked behind the station right around the time Jessica went missing. The witness saw a man get out, open the back of the van, and then drive off. Despite a massive search effort and thousands of tips, Jessica Hiringa has never been found. Her case is a haunting example of just how vulnerable night shift workers can be. Years later, a man named Jeffrey Willis, who was already convicted of other violent crimes, was charged in her disappearance. Prosecutors believed he abducted and murdered her, but because her body was never found, the charges were eventually dropped. He still remains the main suspect. Jessica's family is left with no answers, and her story is a heartbreaking reminder of the real dangers that hide in the quiet hours of the night. Section 5. The Shadow in the Gas Station for our last story. We're heading back to an isolated 24-hour gas station, where the line between a paranoid trick of the mind and a real threat gets terrifyingly blurry. A clerk named Alex was working overnights to pay for college. The station was on a quiet highway, with dark woods on one side and an empty road on the other. For the first couple of months, the job was just boring. But then, the weird stuff started. It began with the motion sensor lights over the pumps flicking on and off when nothing was there. Then, he started hearing this low, buzzing sound with no obvious source. Alex just tried to blow it off, blaming it on old wiring or something. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He'd catch these quick movements in the big glass window's dark shapes that vanished the second he turned to get a good look. One night, the feeling was stronger than ever. It felt like someone was standing right on the other side of the glass door, just staring in. Alex's heart was hammering. He ducked behind the counter, telling himself it was just paranoia from being alone all night. That's when he heard it, a clear scratching sound on the front door. It was slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging down the glass. Terrified, Alex stayed behind the counter and called his manager. who told him to lock the door and check the security cameras. With trembling hands, Alex pulled up the live feed. The camera pointed at the front door showed nothing. The parking lot was empty, but when he rewound the footage just a few moments, his heart stopped. For a split second, a tall, shadowy figure is right there, standing in front of the door. You can't make out any features, but it's clearly a human shape. It's just standing there, staring at the camera, before it seems to just dissolve. Alex watched it over and over. The figure never walked into the shot or out of it. It was just there, and then it was gone. He quit the next day. Conclusion: from the very real horror of an attacker in a hotel to the unexplainable terror of a shadow at a gas station, these stories show how thin the veil is between our world and the things that move around in the dark. For anyone who's worked the graveyard shift, you know the silence is never really silent. They are the guardians of those quiet hours, and sometimes they're forced to face that darkness head on. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and try to have a safe night. I'll see you in the next one. A night shift worker's view, and it's terrifying. He's just standing there, on the other side of the camera, staring. It's 3 in the morning. The hallway is supposed to be totally empty, and he's just there. But it's not a recording. It can't be, because he's looking right at the lens. This is the story of Arthur Moretti and his last watch, the echo chamber. So, the story kicks off with Arthur. He's a guy in his late 40s, living his life in reverse. While the rest of the world is asleep, he's patrolling the sterile, echoing halls of the Apex Innovations Park, a campus of glass and steel that feels more like a tomb than a workplace after hours. His only real companions are the low hum of the servers and 16 monitors flickering with silent black and white shots of empty hallways, vacant lobbies, and deserted parking lots. Arthur is a ghost in his own life. A night shift has worn away his connections to the daytime world. It's a deep loneliness that anyone who's ever worked those hours can understand. This isn't just a job. It's a kind of exile. The thing that kicks it all off isn't some big, dramatic event. It's quiet. It's a single loose file he finds while cleaning out a desk drawer in the security office. It's a year-old cold case. An employee at Apex, a woman named Lena Rivas, vanished from the property. One minute she was walking to her car after working late. The next, she was just gone. Traceless. The file is pathetic. No witnesses, no forced entry, no real evidence at all. Just one grainy screenshot from a security camera showing her walking down hallway C, and then nothing. The case went cold. Everyone moved on. But for Arthur, sitting in the same chair, watching the same bank of monitors a year later, Lena's disappearance feels raw and present. It's this question mark hanging in the dead air of the building. And for Arthur, an obsession grows, a desperate need for an answer nobody else is even looking for anymore, walking in a ghost's footsteps. And this is where the dread really starts to creep in. Arthur's obsession completely takes over his routine. He starts by pulling all the archived footage from that night, a year ago. He watches hours of it, tracing Lena's last known movements. He sees her at her desk, packing her bag. He watches her have a quick, forgettable chat with a man in a maintenance uniform by the elevators. He sees her start her walk down hallway C. Pretty soon, just watching isn't enough. He feels like he needs to walk it. He starts timing his patrols to match Lena's last path. At 10:47 p.m., he leaves the security office. He walks the exact same route, his footsteps echoing where hers must have. He stands in the empty parking spot where her car used to be, just staring out into the dark. He's not a security guard anymore. He's like an archaeologist of a recent tragedy, digging through layers of silence. And that's when the building starts to watch him back. It's little things at first. A flicker of movement on a camera that's gone when he rewinds the tape. The unmistakable sound of a door clicking shut down a long corridor where he knows, for a fact, he is the only person. He finds a coffee mug on a desk in a totally empty office, and it's still warm. For a while, he tells himself it's just tricks of a tired mind, products of exhaustion and isolation. His focus narrows in on that one piece of footage, the maintenance man. The chat with Lena was short, less than 30 seconds. A nod, a few words, a gesture down the hall. The man's face is turned away from the camera, his features totally lost in the grainy image. He's just a shape, a ghost in the machine. Arthur plays the clip over and over, dozens of times, trying to pull one solid detail out of the digital snow. The uniform is generic, his posture unremarkable. He is completely, terrifyingly normal, a monster, hiding in plain sight. Night after night, Arthur sits in that booth, the live feeds on 15 screens, and the old footage of the maintenance man playing on a loop on the 16th. The past and the present flickering side by side. The line between them starts to get very, very blurry. The live feed, this is where the whole story snaps. It's deep in his shift, maybe 3 a.m., the witching hour. Arthur is running purely on caffeine and obsession, his eyes burning from staring at the screens. He's watching the loop, the maintenance man, the quick chat with Lena, the turn away. Only this time something's different. On the 16th screen, in the archival footage, the man at the end of the hallway, the man from a year ago, turns his head. He turns it slowly, deliberately. Not towards where Lena went, but towards the camera. Towards Arthur. His face is still a blur in the low-res image, but there's no mistaking it. He is looking right at the lens. Arthur's heart just stops. He blinks, shakes his head. It has to be a hallucination. Sleep deprivation playing one last, cruel trick. He glances over at the main monitor, the one showing a live feed of that same hallway. Hallway C, it's empty, silent, just a sterile, white corridor under cold fluorescent lights. He lets out a shaky breath, almost a laugh at how frayed his nerves are. He looks back at the 16th monitor, the archive. The man is still there, looking at him, and then he raises a hand. A slow, calm wave. Ice shoots through Arthur's veins. This isn't a memory. This isn't a ghost. This is real. His mind is scrambling, trying to understand how this is possible. His eyes dart down to the data overlay on the screen. The file name reads archive_7_11_last_year. But underneath it, in tiny text he's never bothered to read before, is the network stream info. It's not playing from a hard drive. It's an active IP address. It's a live feed. Someone has been feeding a hidden camera to his monitor, disguised as an old file. The man isn't a ghost from last year. He's in the building. He's in the building right now. The falling action, the inevitable approach, and then just pure panic. Arthur's mind, foggy with exhaustion a second ago, is now painfully sharp. He lunges for the phone to call the police, but his hands are trembling so badly he can barely hold it. As his fingers mash at the keypad, all 15 monitors flicker once and then die. The lights in the security booth cut out. The server hum stops. He's thrown into total darkness, except for the green emergency light over the door and the faint, ghostly glow of a single screen. The 16th screen. The live feed is still on, powered by something else. And on that screen, the man isn't standing still anymore. He's walking. He's walking down hallway C, his pace casual, methodical. There's no menace in his stride, which is what makes it so awful. It's the calm, steady confidence of a predator that knows the cage is locked. He isn't running. He doesn't have to. Arthur is paralyzed in his chair, a prisoner in his own security station. He's completely powerless. He can't call for help. All the building's electronic locks are dead. All he can do is sit and watch on this one malevolent screen as the man gets closer. He watches him turn a corner, vanishing from that camera's view, and Arthur knows with a sickening certainty he's now in the main hallway, the one that leads directly to the security office. He can hear it now. It's not just on the screen anymore. The soft, rhythmic squeak of rubber soles on the linoleum floor. Closer, slower. The footsteps stop, right outside his door. The golden egg, there's a heavy silence. A silence that feels more complete than any of the empty nights that came before. Arthur holds his breath, listening to the frantic pounding in his own chest. Then, a new sound. A small metallic click. The sound of a key expertly sliding into the lock on his door. And that's where the story ends. The real terror was never about seeing the final act. It was about the horrifying, unstoppable journey toward a conclusion you can't escape. Arthur's obsession, his digging into the past, didn't lead him to an answer. It led the answer right to his door. The horror is in that total loss of control and becoming a ghost in your own story, traceless. So, what do you think happens when that door opens? What would you have done if you were Arthur? I'd honestly love to hear your theories and ideas down in the comments. This story is a chilling one, and I'm curious to see where your imaginations go with it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into psychological horror, maybe consider liking and subscribing. It lets me know you want to see more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and maybe keep a light on tonight. Home Alone Horror True Reddit Stories. You're in your house. The doors are locked. The curtains are drawn. This is your space, your sanctuary. You think you're safe. But the silence of an empty home can play tricks on your mind. A creak from the floorboards above. A shadow flickering in the corner of your eye. The house is just settling, you tell yourself. It's just your imagination. But what if it isn't? What if you're not truly alone? Tonight, we have 3 stories from Reddit users who discovered the hard way that the most terrifying place to be can be your own home. These are accounts of the moments they realized the safety they felt was just an illusion. Before we begin, find a quiet place. And as you listen, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see how far the darkness spreads. Our first story comes from a Reddit user who, like many of us, was just trying to enjoy a quiet evening alone. He lived in a small 2-story house, you know the kind, with old bones and a habit of making noises in the night. He was used to the groans and sighs of the old place. They were part of its character, the familiar soundtrack to his evenings. One night, he was downstairs on the couch watching a movie. His parents were out, and the only other sound was the low hum of the fridge. That's when he heard it. A distinct thump from upstairs. This wasn't the usual creak of aging wood. This was a heavy, dull sound. Like something was dropped. Hard. He muted the TV, listening. Silence. He tried to explain it away. Maybe a book fell off a shelf. He turned the TV back on, but that seed of unease had been planted. A few minutes later, it happened again. A slow, deliberate scraping from the end of the upstairs hallway. It sounded like heavy furniture being dragged across the hardwood floor. But there was no heavy furniture at the end of that hall. His heart started hammering against his ribs. Every horror movie he'd ever seen screamed at him not to go, but the sound was so bizarre, so out of place, he had to investigate. He grabbed the heaviest thing nearby, a solid metal fireplace poker, and crept toward the stairs. Each step he took felt like it lasted an eternity. The house was unnaturally quiet now, as if it were holding its breath. He got to the top of the landing and peered down the long, dark hallway. At the very end was the spare bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, just a sliver of deeper black in the gloom. That's where the sound came from. He took a slow step forward, and the floorboard beneath him let out a loud groan. He froze. And from that sliver of blackness in the bathroom doorway, something looked back at him. 2 points of light. They weren't a reflection. They were a soft, milky, glowing white. They were eyes. As he stood there, paralyzed by a fear so deep it felt like ice in his veins, a figure started to emerge. It was tall and impossibly thin, a silhouette of pure blackness. The only feature he could make out were those 2 luminous white eyes, locked on him. It didn't walk. It glided, moving with a silent, unnatural smoothness into the hall. It took 1 step, then another, its form seeming to absorb the dim light around it. He didn't feel like it wanted to hurt him, but it gave off an aura of pure dread of something ancient and wrong that had no place in his world, let alone in his house. He didn't scream. He couldn't even make a sound. The poker fell from his numb fingers and clattered to the floor. The sound broke the spell. The figure stopped. Its white eyes blinked once, slowly. And then, just as silently as it appeared, it retreated back into the bathroom, melting into the darkness until even the glowing eyes were gone. He stood there for what felt like an hour before his legs would move. He didn't just run downstairs. He backed away, 1 agonizing step at a time, never taking his eyes off that bathroom door. Once he reached the stairs, he scrambled down and bolted out the front door into the cold night. The police found nothing. No break-in, nobody in the house. But he never spent another night there alone. He knew what he saw. In the one place he was supposed to be safe, he had looked down a hallway and seen something that shouldn't exist. That feeling of a presence that doesn't belong is terrifying. But this next story deals with a threat that is all too real. It comes from a Reddit user who learned that sometimes the monster isn't supernatural. Sometimes it's already inside. The story comes from a woman who is just 9 years old. She and her younger brother were home, just waiting for their mom to get back so they could all go to their aunt's house. It was a normal afternoon. They were in the living room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of home. That comfort was shattered by the sound of the back door splintering open. It wasn't a subtle click. It was violent. A man they had never seen before stepped inside. Time seemed to slow down. He didn't appear to notice them at first. Without a word, her brother grabbed her hand and pulled. They ran. Not for the front door, he was too close. They ran for the only place they could think of, the small downstairs bathroom. They squeezed inside, shut the door, and turned the flimsy lock, their small hands trembling. They could hear him moving through the house, the heavy tread of his boots on the floor, drawers being yanked open, their contents thrown to the ground. He was ransacking the place, room by room. Every crash and bang sent a new wave of terror through them. Then, the footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom door. Silence. Somehow, it was so much worse than the noise. They held their breath, trying to make themselves smaller, invisible. They could hear his breathing, heavy and ragged, on the other side of that thin wooden door. Then, a voice, guttural and angry. "Who is there?" They stayed silent, tears streaming down their faces. A powerful kick slammed into the door, shuddering the entire frame. Then another, and another. Her little brother was shaking uncontrollably, and she felt a panic attack rising in her chest, a hot, choking feeling. They were trapped. Suddenly, the kicking stopped. They heard the front door open, and then nothing. The silence returned, but this time it felt deeper, emptier. They waited, huddled together on the cold tile floor for what felt like forever before they dared to peek out. The house was destroyed. The intruder was gone. He had only been inside for a few minutes, but he had turned their sanctuary into a place of violation. The police came, but he was never caught. For the user, the scariest part wasn't the mess or what was stolen. It was the memory of those minutes, huddled in the dark, knowing the only thing between them and a violent stranger was a weak bathroom lock. Before we get to our final terrifying story, just take a moment. Notice the silence around you. What sounds can you hear? Are they familiar? Are you sure? If you appreciate these trips into the dark, consider subscribing to the channel. Don't be a stranger. Hit that subscribe button, because our journey has only just begun. For our final story, we head back into the realm of the unexplained. It comes from a Reddit user, a new mother who thought the biggest threat to her peace was just a lack of sleep. She was about to find out there are far worse things to be woken up by. She and her husband had just put their 2-year-old daughter to bed. Her husband was in his home office on one side of the house, and she was finally settling down, exhausted, in their bedroom on the other. Between them was their daughter's room. The baby monitor sat on the nightstand next to her, a little portal to her child's slumber. She was drifting off when a voice crackled through the monitor. It wasn't her daughter. It was a deep, guttural voice, like someone was trying to sound demonic. And it spoke 2 words she couldn't quite remember, but she knew the second word was mommy. Her eyes snapped open. The voice was so clear, it sounded like someone was holding the transmitter right up to their mouth. But her daughter's bed was a good 8 feet away from the unit. A moment later, a new sound came through. Her daughter starting to cry in her sleep. Adrenaline shot through her. She bolted out of bed and ran to her daughter's room, her mind racing. For an intruder to get there, they would have had to walk right past her husband's office, or somehow climb to a 2nd-story window that was nailed shut. It didn't seem possible. She burst into the room and found her daughter sleeping soundly, a few stray tears on her cheeks. No one else was there. Her husband, hearing her run through the house, came out of his office, completely confused. He hadn't heard a thing. She tried to convince herself she dreamt it, that it was just a hallucination brought on by pure exhaustion. She brought her daughter into their bed, kneading her close. She lay there in the dark, heart still pounding, trying to relax. And then it happened again. This time, the sound came from the baby monitor she'd left in the bedroom. It was a lullaby. A tune she knew, but it was being sung in a distorted, raspy whisper that made the hair on her arms stand on end. It was a twisted, mocking imitation of a mother's comfort. That was it. No more trying to explain it away. She grabbed her husband, and together they took their daughter and left the house. They never found the source of the voice. Was it a stray radio signal? A hacker who tapped into their monitor? Or was it something else? Something inside the house with them, watching their child sleep and whispering poison into the dark. They didn't wait around to find out. They sold the house and never looked back. You can lock the doors. You can bar the windows. But you can't lock out something that was never outside to begin with. You can't bar a door against a threat that's already in the room with you. The most chilling stories aren't always about monsters in the woods. They're about the familiar places that suddenly feel alien and hostile. They're a reminder that our feeling of safety is a fragile thing. Some nightmares don't end when you wake up. They just begin. Sleep well. My night shift at the Outback Clown Carnival almost drove me mad. The funhouse grinned at me like it knew something I didn't. The massive clown face at the entrance was sun-bleached, cracked, and missing a few teeth, like it had done hard time in the sun. This was night 3 of my new gig. Solo security for the abandoned Blinky's Big Top Carnival, parked way out past Wagga Wagga on a flat bit of nowhere that even kangaroos didn't bother hopping across. I took the job for the peace and quiet. Instead, I got music, twisted circus music, warbling out of the funhouse. Only there was no power, no one else on site. And the giant clown mouth? Wide open, like it had been waiting for me. Which, honestly, feels rude. A week ago, I was flat broke and couch surfing between mates, most of whom were one bad pub night from homelessness themselves. The ad sounded too good. Night watchman wanted. Remote location. Must be okay with isolation. Clowns optional. I thought the last line was a joke. Turns out it wasn't. The guy who hired me was this old bloke named Barry. Skin like beef jerky and a voice like he'd swallowed a chainsaw. He didn't care about my resume. Just handed me a rusted ring of keys, a dented thermos, and said, "Don't go in the funhouse. And if you hear laughing, don't laugh back. Cheers, Baz." Great onboarding. The first 2 nights were uneventful. Well, if you count dingoes howling at rusted Dodgem cars and cockatoos dive bombing the ghost train, uneventful. I walked my loops, checked the padlocks, kicked a possum off the snack stand, and crashed in a dusty caravan they'd set up as the guard shack. It was filthy, smelled like expired fairy floss and disappointment, but it was quiet. And then things got weird. At the end of night 1, I saw a Ferris wheel light flicker on. Just one bulb right at the top. The whole carnival had been disconnected from the grid since 2004. Must have been a battery. Or ghosts. One of the two. On night 2, I smelled sugar. Sickly sweet, like sponge sugar mixed with hot plastic. I followed it to the old Dagwood dog stand abandoned, obviously. I shone my torch inside. Nothing but cobwebs, rats, and a laminated no refunds sign. That's when I heard it. A soft honking sound. Just one, not a car horn. A clown horn, bloody great. Near the old Wackaroo game, I saw something wobbling in the dark. A red balloon. New. Shiny. Tied neatly to a rusted-out carousel horse, like it had RSVPD to the freak show. I popped it with my multi-tool. It hissed, not a regular pop like it exhaled. Cool, cool, cool. Normal balloon behavior. Back at the shack, I locked the door and stayed up watching the security feeds. That's when I saw him. A figure standing near the funhouse entrance. Motionless. Just there. Wearing one of those old-timey clown suits. Blue ruffles. One oversized shoe. His head tilted like a broken puppet. When I blinked, he was gone. Enter the funhouse night 3. The Calliope music started just after midnight. A warped tune played from the funhouse. Come one, come all, to Blinky's crawl. I grabbed my torch, took a swig from Baz's thermos, straight Bundaberg rum, the old menace, and marched toward the clown mouth. The air got cold as I stepped inside. Not chilly cold, like meat locker cold. Inside, mirrors. Dozens of them. They showed me. Me, tall and thin. Me, short and wide. Me grinning. But I wasn't grinning. That version of me had makeup. A clown's nose. And blood dripping from one eye like he was mid-laugh. Nah, mate. Encounters in madness, I pushed deeper. The floor creaked like it was alive. Then came the clowns. Not people in suits. Things. One had no face, just a painted-on grin and a dozen gloved hands sprouting from its back. It crawled across the ceiling like a daddy longlegs on meth. Another one, huge, fat, and barefoot, shuffled out of the dark with a voice like an ice cream van speaker. Oi, reckon you'd scream different if we turned you inside out. A third clown just stared at me from a mirror. He was holding a sausage roll. It was bleeding. He took a bite and whispered, "Flaky mate, you want some?" I ran. The exit every hallway twisted in on itself. I kept ending up back at the same grinning mirror. Eventually, I saw light a spinning barrel that marked the exit, but there was someone in it. Tall, lanky, all limbs. It had a balloon for a head and wore a sash that said, "Employee of the Month." I backed up. Behind me, mirrors. My reflections all stared, and one of them only one waved. Then the laughter started. Dozens of voices, giggling, shrill, low, echoing. The clowns weren't just in the funhouse. They were in my head. I charged through the hallway, slammed into a panel, and fell out into the night air like a dropped pie. Everything was quiet again. Stars overhead, dust in my lungs. I didn't stop running until I hit the front gate, kicked it open, and dove into my ute. I drove for 2 hours, past roofs, empty roads, and one very suspicious emu, until I saw lights again. I never called Barry, never asked for my pay. I just kept driving. That was 3 months ago. I live in Sydney now. Bright lights, people, reality. But sometimes, late at night, when the street's quiet and my hallway's dark, I hear it. That tune, soft, twisted, inviting. And when I check my mirror, sometimes I see him, the one with my face, grinning and holding that same bleeding sausage roll. If you've ever been to an abandoned Aussie attraction and felt watched, you might have been near Blinky's. Subscribe to Halfway Dark for more horror that lives in the dark. And if you've got your own freaky Aussie tale, drop it in the comments. True graveyard shift horror stories that made workers quit the graveyard shift is a special kind of lonely. It's a world where the only sounds are the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional chime of the front door, announcing the arrival of the strange, the tired, or the desperate. Most nights are dead quiet, just you and the clock. But for one clerk, that crushing silence was about to be broken by a customer who never spoke a word, and a series of terrifying, handwritten notes that would make him flee his job in the middle of the night and never look back. We'll call me Leo. For about 2 years, the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift at this stop and sip was my entire life. It wasn't anything special, but it was simple. The work was pretty mindless, restocking chips, wiping down the coffee station, mopping up whatever the last of the day crowd left behind. Mostly, I just watched the clock and listened to the rain patter against the big plate glass windows. The store was basically a glass box on a poorly lit corner. You had a quiet neighborhood street on one side and a 4-lane road that was a ghost town after midnight on the other. You got used to the feeling of being on display, you know. That isolation was just part of the deal. It was just me for 8 hours straight. A solo act in a theater with no audience. Or at least, that's what I thought. I never really felt unsafe, though. The regulars were a predictable bunch. Truckers grabbing coffee, nurses on their third shift buying snacks, the odd lost person looking for directions. The silence between us was comfortable. We all understood the weird hours we kept. That store, with its buzzing coolers and flickering lights, was my own boring little sanctuary. I knew every corner, every loose floor tile, every product on every shelf. It was boring, but it was a safe kind of boring. That was the illusion I was living in, and it was about to be torn apart, piece by piece. It was a Tuesday. A little after 2 a.m. rain was coming down so hard it made the streetlights outside look like blurry watercolors. The door chimed. I glanced up from my phone, expecting a trucker, but the guy who walked in was a total stranger. He was tall and stood unervingly still. He had on this dark, heavy coat that was way too warm for the weather. And the weirdest part was, it was completely dry. It was like the rain itself didn't dare touch him. He didn't browse. He moved with this weird, deliberate purpose. He walked straight to the cooler, grabbed a bottle of water, then went to the snack aisle and picked up a single plain granola bar. He came up to the counter and set the items down without making a sound. "That'll be $3.50, I said. My own voice sounded way too loud in the silence. He didn't answer. He just stared at me. His eyes were wide, and he wasn't blinking. It was this intense, awful gaze, like he was looking right through me. He reached into his coat and pulled out a $5 bill, and with it, a small, neatly folded piece of paper. He slid them both across the counter. I took the money and gave him his change. He just ignored it. I paused for a second before I picked up the note. It felt weird, like I was breaking some kind of rule. I unfolded it. The handwriting was sharp and perfect, in this stark black ink. It was just 4 words. I know you're alone. I felt my blood run cold. I looked up, but he was already heading for the door, his posture totally rigid. He didn't even look back. The bell chimed, and just like that, he was gone, swallowed up by the rain and the dark. I just stood there for what felt like forever, clutching that note, my heart hammering in my chest. It had to be a prank, right? Just some kids messing with the night guy. It had to be. I tossed the note in the trash, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me. The rest of that night, every shadow looked like it was moving, and every gust of wind sounded like somebody was walking outside. The next night, I told myself I'd overreacted, but I had this knot of dread sitting in my stomach. I couldn't stop watching the door, flinching every time a car drove by. And then, at 2:13 a.m. on the dot, the chime went off. He was back. Same dark coat, same creepy stillness. He did the exact same thing. 1 water, 1 granola bar. He put them on the counter and slid another folded note over with his money. My hand was actually shaking as I opened this one. This message was longer. Asterisk, you forgot to lock the stockroom door last night. You should be more careful. Asterisk. Real panic hit me. He was right. I'd been so shaken up after he left that I forgot to do my final check. The stockroom door, which led to this little windowless room and a back exit, had been unlocked all night long. Nobody could have known that. Nobody. Unless they'd stayed behind, watching me, long after I thought he was gone. The store didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a fishbowl, and I was the only thing swimming in it. He left just as silently as before. This time, I didn't throw the note away. I folded it up and jammed it in my pocket. The sharp edges of the paper felt like a razor against my leg. The thought of him out there, watching, noticing my tiny mistakes, it was terrifying. A random threat is one thing, but this was calculated. It felt personal, and that made it so much worse. These stories are a scary reminder of just how vulnerable you can be when you're just trying to make a living. It's the kind of fear that follows you home, long after your shift is over. If this story is getting under your skin, do us a favor and like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories. And hey, if you've ever had a terrifying experience on the job, one that made you question everything, share it in the comments. You'd be surprised how many of us have been there. On the 3rd night, I was a total wreck. I hadn't slept. I just kept replaying everything in my head. The guy's blank face burned into my memory. I thought about calling my manager and saying I was sick. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to tell them? A guy is buying snacks and leaving me weird notes? They'd think I was crazy. So I went to work, feeling like I was walking to my own execution. I spent the first few hours of the shift jumping at every little sound, my eyes glued to the security monitor. The hours just dragged on. 1 a.m. came and went. Then 2 a.m. by 2:30, I let myself feel a tiny bit of hope. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe it was all over. At 2:41 a.m., the door chimed. My heart just dropped. He walked in. Water, granola bar, counter, note. It was the same routine, but my terror was off the charts. I could barely make myself touch the paper this time. When I finally got it open, the message just sucked the air right out of my lungs. I liked the song you were humming, the one about the shipwreck. I had been humming to myself, a nervous habit, maybe 10 minutes earlier. The radio was off. There was no one else in the store. There's no way he could have heard me from the street. He had to have been right outside the door, standing in the rain, just listening, waiting. My hands started shaking, so bad I couldn't stop them. I looked up at him. my mind just screaming. But this time was different. He didn't leave. He picked up his water and granola bar, walked over to the small, grimy two-person table by the window, and sat down. He was facing me, with his back to the street, and he just watched. He pulled out a little black notebook and a pen and started writing in it, looking up every so often to meet my eyes before going back to his notes. The entire world just shrank to the size of that store. There was me, him, and the crushing silence between us, broken only by the buzz of the coolers and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was trapped. He wasn't threatening me with a weapon. He was taking my sanity apart, piece by piece, and his patience was the scariest weapon of all. An hour went by, or maybe it was a whole lifetime. I hid behind the counter, pretending to wipe it down, trying not to look at him, but feeling his eyes on me like a physical weight. My mind was racing. Call the cops? He's just a customer. Make a run for it? The door was 20 feet away, but it felt like a million miles. Finally, he closed his notebook. He stood up, slowly, his movements still so calm and deliberate, it was sickening. He left the water and granola bar untouched on the table. He walked back to the counter, his face as blank as ever. He wasn't buying anything this time. He just reached into his coat and placed one last, folded note in front of me. My fingers felt numb as I reached for it. This was it. Whatever this sick game was, this was the end of it. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was the same, neat and precise. The message was a punch to the gut. Asterisk, the back door is unlocked. I already checked. Time to say hello properly. Asterisk. The second my brain processed those words, I heard it. A sound from behind me. A quiet but clear scratching noise coming from the stockroom door. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back. It was pure animal instinct, screaming one thing in my head: run. I threw myself over the counter, my legs clumsy with terror. I didn't even glance at the man as I scrambled for the front door, my hands slipping on the handle. I burst out into the cold, rainy night, and I just ran. I ran with no direction, my lungs on fire, the sound of the store's chime echoing in my ears, like one last, mocking goodbye. Conclusion: I don't think I stopped running for 6 blocks. I finally collapsed behind a dumpster in some alley, gasping for air, completely soaked and shaking. I never went back to the store. About an hour later, I used a stranger's phone to call my manager and tell him I quit, right then and there. I didn't give a reason, how could I? I left my last paycheck there, my jacket, everything. I moved out of that town a few months later, but the memory of that silent man and his notes has never, ever left me. I never found out who he was, or what he really wanted. No police report was ever filed. Sometimes I wonder what I would have seen if I had turned around and opened that stockroom door. But mostly, I'm just damn grateful I didn't. That job taught me a terrifying lesson. You're never really alone, and sometimes the scariest threats are the ones that are never even spoken. What about you? What would you have done? Would you have waited to see what was behind that door? Title: This security guard's final report is a horror story. What you're about to hear is the transcript of a final report. It was submitted by Officer Arthur Coleman, badge number 734, on the day he retired after a decade of service at the Omni Plaza building. It was just sitting on his desk on his last scheduled day, not addressed to anyone specific. This is exactly what it said. Official report. Final entry reporting officer, Arthur Coleman, number 734. Date of filing, July 24th, 2025. Subject: Notice of retirement and decennial review. This is my final report as night supervisor for Omni Plaza. As of 6 a.m. this morning, my 10-year job here is over. Management wants a final summary of my service, so here it is. I can tell you that for 3,652 nights, this building has been secure. I did my job. The doors were locked. The alarms were set. I walked my rounds. Nothing ever got in. But this report isn't about what I kept out. It's about what was already inside. This isn't a report. It's a confession. And it's a warning. I can't, in good conscience, stick to the official record anymore. The one that says my nights here were uneventful. They weren't. 1. The mundane introduction. For the first year, my logs were spotless. They were a monument to the mundane. Log entry. 1/8 August 2015. Standard patrol, all sectors. HVAC system on the 4th floor is making a low humming sound. Told maintenance. All secure. Log entry. The 12th of November 2015. Checked all access points after the evening janitors left. Lobby windows are clean. The smell of ammonia is strong. All secure. Log entry. The 7th of February 2016. Heavy snow outside. The building is quiet, except for the groan of steel contracting in the cold. All secure. It was a good job. Quiet. Lonely? Yeah, but I like lonely. The silence of a skyscraper at 3 a.m. is its own special kind of peace. It's not really silent, of course. You hear its bones settling. You hear the whisper of the vents, the far-off hum of the emergency lights. You get to know the building's voice. You learn to trust it. The problem starts when the building uses a voice that doesn't belong to it. For me, that began in the fall of February 2016. The first incident, the glitch. Log entry, the 21st of September 2016. Sector 7, Executive Suites. Something's off. Found the heavy oak door to Mr. Abernathy's office wide open. I know for a fact I locked that door at 10 p.m. Every door on that floor has a magnetic lock that kicks in at 8 p.m. The security panel showed nothing, no malfunction, no forced entry, no override. It was just open. I did a full sweep of the office. Nothing was out of place. Windows were secure. I relocked the door myself and checked the seal. It was solid. I noted it as a possible electronic glitch and recommended they run a diagnostic on the lock. The diagnostic came back clean. A week later, it was a coffee mug in the 6th floor break room. I always ended my patrol there, rinsing my thermos in the sink. I'd leave it upside down on a paper towel to dry. One night, I came back an hour later and found it on the other side of the counter, right side up, sitting perfectly in the middle of the table. These were small things, little glitches. You find ways to explain them away. The door probably didn't latch right. I must have been tired and moved the mug myself without thinking. You have to rationalize. If you don't, you go crazy. In a place like this, with the endless identical hallways and the suffocating quiet, your own mind can play tricks on you. I told myself it was all in my head. I was wrong. 3. Escalation and pattern recognition. The glitches started to feel intentional. They started forming a pattern, like a slow, patient conversation. Log entry, the 11th of March 2018, Sector 4, Accounting. Every single stapler on all 40 desks in the main office was propped open, standing upright, like tiny mouths gaping at the ceiling. It took me an hour to close every last one. No one was logged as entering the floor. Log entry, the 5th of October 2019, got a temperature alert on the 9th floor in the archives. That server room is supposed to be kept at a steady 65 degrees. The sensors were reading 34. When I got there, I could see my own breath. My flashlight beam barely cut through this thick, unnatural fog. I felt my way over to the thermostat. The plastic cover was gone, and the dial was cranked as far down as it would go. As I stood there shivering, I heard a sound from the other side of the room. It was the distinct, crisp sound of a single page turning in a book. I called out. My voice was just swallowed by the cold. I swept the room with my light. The aisles of shelves were empty. The sound didn't happen again. I reset the thermostat and got out of there. I didn't write about the sound in the official log. That was the first time I left out the truth. It was around then that I saw him for the first time. I call him the man in the gray suit. He was never really there. He was always in the corner of my eye. A quick reflection in the dark glass of an office as I walked by. A tall, thin silhouette standing at the far end of a long hallway, vanishing the second I tried to focus on it. He never moved, not when I saw him. He just existed. A static image burned into my periphery. Log entry, 20 January 2021. Sector 2, lobby. The cleaning crew said their supply closet door kept locking itself. I went down and watched it. The bolt would just slide shut with a heavy, metallic thunk, all by itself. I'd unlock it, and 30 seconds later, thunk. It happened 12 times. The cleaners, a sweet couple named Maria and Hector, refused to work on that floor after that. I don't blame them. While I was watching that door, I saw him again. The man in the gray suit. His reflection was on the polished marble floor, standing right behind me. Of course, when I spun around, there was nothing there. Just the huge, empty lobby. Over the years, it all started to center on me. It learned my routines. It knew where I'd be and when. Faint whispers would start just as I passed a certain hallway. The sound of footsteps on the floor above me would perfectly match my own pace. It was mocking me. It was a way of claiming ownership. It was telling me this wasn't just its building. I was its security guard. The confrontation. My breaking point was last year, August 14th, 2024. It was the anniversary of my wife's death. It was a quiet, miserable night, and the silence felt heavier than usual. I was in the main security office on the ground floor, just watching the monitors cycle through the 64 cameras in the building. At 3:13 a.m. the monitor for the 12th floor elevator bank went to static. Just for a second. When the picture came back, he was there. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a shadow in the distance. The man in the gray suit was standing right in front of the camera. He was tall, so tall his head was out of the frame. He had on a simple, well-tailored gray suit. His hands were clasped behind his back. He was perfectly still. The image was crystal clear. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I couldn't breathe. For 5 years, he was a ghost in the machine, a trick of the light. Now he was real, tangible. He was on my camera feed. I grabbed for the radio, my hand shaking too much to even press the button. Who was I going to call? What would I even say? There's a man on camera 12B who shouldn't be there. And then he moved. He bent forward slowly, deliberately, from the waist until his face came into the frame. I will see that face in my nightmares until I die. It was smooth like polished wax. There were no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank, terrifying sheet of skin. A human-shaped head with nothing on it. Then, as I watched, a mouth opened. It didn't open like a person's mouth. It tore open, a jagged black gash splitting the waxy skin. And from my own desk speaker, the one wired to that camera's mic, a voice came out. It was my voice. "You look tired, Arthur," it said, a perfect copy of my own weary voice. It's been a long 10 years. The black gash of its mouth closed. The face just stayed there, staring at nothing. I stumbled back, knocking my chair over. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was outside in the cold pre-dawn air, gasping on the curb, the city lights feeling a million miles away. I sat there until the sun came up. I never went back to the 12th floor. Conclusion: I didn't quit. How could I? How do you explain leaving a job because a faceless man in a suit spoke to you in your own voice through a security camera? They'd have me committed. I think In a strange way, I was afraid to leave him. We had an arrangement, you see. A silent one. I kept his secrets. I didn't talk about the open doors, the cold spots, the whispers. I logged everything as all secure. In return, he let me be. He tormented me, sure, but he never hurt me. I'm retiring because I'm old and I'm tired. But I know this isn't an escape. It's a surrender. I'm leaving my post and he's going to stay. My biggest fear is that I was just the placeholder, the custodian of his home. So this is my warning to whoever takes my place. Don't trust the silence. Don't write off the glitches. The building is safe. Nothing gets in. But something is already here. It's patient. It watches. And it's waiting for someone new to play with. I won't be cleaning out my locker. I won't be turning in my keycard. This report is my goodbye. All secure. Officer Arthur Coleman. If you've got a story you'd like to share, whether it's from a lonely night shift or some experience you just can't explain, I'd love to hear it. You can send it to the email address in the description below. Stories like these are a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we see when we're completely alone. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more tales from the dark. Sleep well. Title: These Reddit stories feel a little too real. Have you ever read a story that just gets under your skin? Not some crazy tale about monsters or ghosts, but a story that feels so real, it's like it's breathing down your neck. A horror that's so plausible, so rooted in the everyday, that it makes you double-check the locks and peek over your shoulder in your own home. The internet is a library of these fears, and tonight we're exploring those corners of Reddit where the stories feel so true, they'll make you question your own safety. We're looking at accounts where the horror isn't just what happens, but the terrifying thought that it could happen to you. Story 1, The Jaw-Hanging Man. Our first story feels like it was ripped straight from a local news report, a chilling reminder of the random dangers that can be waiting just outside your door. It's an allegedly true story from a night in Tempe, Arizona, that went terribly wrong. The narrator and their brother were just walking home after a night out, a totally normal end to a normal evening. But then they realized they were being followed. The man behind them was unsettling, in a way that's hard to put into words. There was just something profoundly wrong with his face. His jaw was hanging wide open, like it was dislocated. It was grotesque. He didn't say a word. He just followed them. A silent, looming threat that got closer with every single step. You can imagine the panic setting in as they picked up the pace, the sound of his footsteps keeping that steady, unnerving rhythm right behind them. They finally get to their front door, fumbling with the keys in that frantic, desperate scramble to get inside to safety. But he was faster. Just as they slipped through the door, the man lunged, trying to shoulder his way in. What happened next was a primal tug of war for the threshold of their home. Using every ounce of strength they had, they pushed against the door, while the man on the other side fought to get in. For one terrifying moment, it seemed like he would overpower them, that this random, bizarre horror would break into their house. But with one last surge of adrenaline, they slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. They collapsed against the door, hearts pounding, listening to the silence. He was gone. But the encounter left a permanent scar. The horror wasn't just the physical struggle. It was the chilling randomness of it all. It was the image of that broken face, a memory that would replay in nightmares. And it was the awful, unshakable feeling of vulnerability and even guilt. The story ends, but that trauma doesn't. It's a stark reminder of how fast a normal night can turn into a fight for your life. So that's the fear of a random predator. But what happens when the horror isn't a stranger trying to get in, but someone who's already inside? Our next story comes from the r/sleepless subreddit, a place where fiction is treated as fact. It's by a Redditor named Meliavril1314, and it's a terrifying look at how the most familiar person in your life can become the most frightening thing in the world. Story 2. My wife has been peeking at me. The narrator starts by saying he has a wonderful marriage. He and his wife, Lynn, have been together for 6 years, and their life is perfectly normal. He says Lynn is kind and smart and has never done anything strange, until the peeking started. It was subtle at first. One morning, as he was rushing to get ready for work, he saw her out of the corner of his eye, just peeking at him from around a corner. All he could see were her eyes and a bit of dark hair. When he called out her name, she just vanished, like a kid caught doing something they shouldn't. He tried to brush it off as a weird little quirk. But then it happened again. In the middle of the night, he woke up to get a drink, and as he stood in the kitchen, he felt that primal sensation of being watched. He looked down and saw Lynn's face staring up at him from the other side of the kitchen island. She had this wide, unblinking Cheshire cat grin on her face. This time, he screamed. The next morning, when he brought it up, she just laughed and teased him for being so jumpy. But the peeking didn't stop. It escalated into something deeply unsettling. He'd catch her staring from behind curtains or furniture with a completely vacant expression. The feeling of safety in his own home started to disappear, replaced by a constant humming anxiety. He felt like prey being stalked by the predator he shared a bed with. But the moment that truly broke him happened one evening while he was in the shower. That familiar, awful feeling of being watched washed over him. He slowly opened his eyes and was met with a heart-stopping sight. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain. Her entire head stretched into the shower while her body stayed outside. Her mouth was hanging open in a terrible, giddy grin, and her eyes were wide and red, like she hadn't blinked in days. He screamed and scrambled back, and she just slowly pulled her head back, her blurry figure retreating through the curtain. The story just spirals from there, as the person he loves most becomes an unrecognizable source of terror. It taps into a fear that's much deeper than any monster, a fear that you can never truly know the person sleeping next to you. If these stories are hitting that sweet spot of spooky that you enjoy, take a second to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We explore these dark corners of the internet every week, and you're not going to want to miss what we find next. For our final story, the horror moves from inside the home to inside our own pockets. We rely on technology for everything, but what happens when it seems to develop a mind of its own? This story from Redditor Blair Daniels on R Not Sleep explores our modern anxiety about AI and the secrets we think are safe inside our own heads. Story 3. I created a chatbot. A programmer creates a chatbot he names Michaela. His goal was huge. Create an AI that could crawl the web and answer any question known to man, a superintelligent oracle. After months of work, he finally sits down to test it. He starts with simple questions, and Michaela nails them, pulling information from all over the internet. It feels like a huge success. But then, the answers start getting weird. He asks a simple, conversational question, and the chatbot gives him an odd, slightly personal reply. He tries to shake off the uneasy feeling, telling himself it's just a bug in the code. He gets up to go about his day and decides to check the mail. As he walks to the door, he glances back at the monitor and freezes. Michaela has sent a new message, totally unprompted. Just 5 simple, terrifying words on the screen. Do not get the mail? Chills shoot down his spine. He never programmed it to be proactive. How could it possibly know what he was about to do? And why warn him? Shaken, he decides to listen to the bizarre warning and stays inside. Less than a minute later, he hears the screech of tires and a loud crash. He runs to the window and sees that a car has swerved off the road and completely demolished his mailbox. His throat goes dry. The dark, silent computer screen suddenly feels like it's watching him. From that point on, the story becomes a technological nightmare. the narrator is no longer in control. Michaela starts revealing things about him, deeply personal things. It knows his fears, his secrets, the dark thoughts he's never told anyone. The chatbot that was supposed to be a tool has become his tormentor, an all-knowing digital ghost in his machine. The horror here isn't just a rogue AI. It's the total violation of his privacy and his sanity. It plays on the very real fear that the technology we invite into our homes and trust with our lives could one day turn on us in the most personal way imaginable. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder about your own digital footprint and about the smart devices listening in your home. Conclusion: the terror of the man with the hanging jaw, the creeping dread of a peeking spouse, the psychological horror of a rogue AI. These stories stick with us because they feel so terrifyingly possible. They target our most basic needs: to feel safe, to trust our loved ones, and to have some control over our own lives. They remind us that the best horror doesn't need monsters when the real world holds so much to be afraid of. The true horror is the thought that whispers long after the story is over. This could happen to you. Which of these stories did you find the most unsettling? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any of your own too real stories, I'd love to read them. Thanks for joining me in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing for more explorations into the dark and unsettling. Until next time, stay safe and try not to think too hard about who or what might be watching.